Washington State Treasurer. Welcome to this year's Bank on Washington Forum. Wow, what a challenging year this has been with COVID-19, which has amplified both the needs and the determination of residents across our state. When individuals are supported, communities have the opportunity to thrive, even during these most difficult times. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you to these vital discussions over the next 2 days. The work you've done and continue to do focused on access to financial services is critical in building up our communities and supporting financial wellness for each Washingtonian. By staying in touch with and supporting each other, we can overcome challenges. Connecting with others will make the journey smoother for the underserved or at-risk populations and those living in rural areas with limited access to services. Whatever your role, whatever your seat at the table, we're all in these discussions together. During this forum, you'll have the opportunity to build relationships and encourage each other. And with that type of synergy, the good work of Bank On will continue to grow and to thrive. So I challenge you to actively participate in your sessions and put into action something you have learned. Remember that you are the key part to the effort to help individuals find their path to financial well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Davidson, for that very warm welcome. Good morning. My name is John Kim, and as the board president of the Financial Empowerment Network, it is my great honor to be welcoming you to the 2020 Bank on Washington Virtual Forum. Before I go any further, I do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which I am sending you this welcome message. The people of the Stillaguamish tribe, people of the river, and to recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and community. I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And on that theme of thank you, I also want to thank our sponsors. We absolutely could not have done this without the support of our sponsors. So thank you to Columbia Bank, and congratulations on your recent national account certification for the foundation account.
Good morning. This is Adam Stein, the Community Reinvestment Act Officer for Columbia Bank. We are proud to support and participate at this summit. Columbia Bank has been part of the Bank On initiative since the beginning and had developed an account that was reflective of Bank On 1.0. Over the past few years, as Bank On 2.0 got its legs, we have been striving to update that original account Columbia had to align with the CFE's national account standards. Well, we are excited to announce we achieved just that earlier this year with Columbia Bank's foundation account. Now, the foundation account is one of the three main checking accounts at the bank, and we believe it to be aptly named, and that it is intended for people just starting out or who have had some struggles getting their finances in order, among many others. The foundation account is structured to be a checkless account with no chance to overdraft or incur non-sufficient fund fees. It just makes sense, not only for the bank, but most importantly, our customers. We also updated our account opening process so that it is more about the person than a score. Columbia bankers are looking forward to partnering with community organizations and people passionate in helping to field solutions that make sense for all customers and help to get everyone banked in our communities.
Thank you, Adam, for your sponsorship of the forum and your ongoing support of Bank On. I also want to thank the Department of Financial Institutions and CFE Fund for funding and support for the relaunch of Bank On Washington in early 2019, and our forum sponsors, Banner Bank, Express Credit Union, Washington Student Achievement Council, Get Washington 529, Northwest Access Fund, and again, Columbia Bank. We also have many in-kind supporters we want to thank, and you will see their logos displayed with our sponsor logos on the rolling marquee during the breaks. Continuing with the theme of thank yous. This year was a challenge, and bringing to you such vibrant programming, such relevant topics, all on a brand new format, that being virtual, wouldn't have been possible without the hard work of the Bank On Forum planning team and advisors. So I want to call them out for the tremendous work that they did. Becky House, Tracy Godat, Erwin Reeves, Will Oberst, Sylvia Raskin, Lynn Peters, Jared Shapiro, Ryan Davis, Carmen Martilla, Adam Stein, Linda Taylor, and Alice Cody. So if you would all please applause and raise your hands and send messages of thank you. This group really pulled it together. So thank you very much to the planning team. So now I want to talk a little bit about why we are here. Local bank-on coalitions play a significant role in helping our and underbanked neighbors build assets, and it is the crucial first step along the financial continuum towards financial empowerment. I also want to share with you a brief history of asset building in Washington State. This is behind the name change of the Seattle-King County Asset Building Collaborative to the Financial Empowerment Network and the integration of Bank On as our major initiative. In 2006, prospective local asset building coalitions comprised of public, private, and nonprofit organizations in Washington State joined together in Ellensburg to discuss ways to improve financial well-being of low and moderate income households and use their collective resources to start and expand asset building services in their communities. In 2007, House Bill 2256, establishing the Family Prosperity Act, was introduced by Representative Jeannie Darneal to adopt policies and provide services to help low-income working families achieve prosperity. Among other changes, the bill created a state asset building coalition that was originally staffed by Community Trade and Economic Development under the leadership of Paul Knox and Annie Brar. Since then, CTED, which is now known as Commerce, has provided funding and technical assistance to help develop and support the statewide and local asset building coalitions through funding provided by the Prosperity Act. Commerce has also led a campaign to increase federal earned income tax credit filing and use of free volunteer tax assistant resources across the state. In 2008, Commerce defined asset poverty as a measure of economic security and mobility based on a household net worth. Net worth is the total value of all assets, including savings, a house, and a business, minus debts. A household is asset poor if it has an insufficient net worth to subsist at the federal poverty level for 3 months in the absence of income. An asset poor household does not have enough savings or wealth to provide for basic needs during extended periods of economic hardship, such as sudden job loss or a medical emergency or pandemic like the one that we are going through right now. Let me take this moment and from Financial Empowerment Network, encourage all asset building and bank-on coalitions to write to their state legislators to share the work and outcomes realized, especially the work you are doing to address the financial hardships of Washingtonians experiencing downturns from the COVID-19. Why is financial empowerment important? In 2010, Congress passed and President Obama signed the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. The act created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In 2012, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, announced the formal launch of the Office of Financial Empowerment, the main goal of which is to help empower consumers to better understand how different financial choices and products impact their financial lives. You will see on the slide the definition of financial empowerment. I'm not going to read that to you. In 2013, the Seattle-King County Asset Building Collaborative changed its name to the Financial Empowerment Network to align with the growing national movement and to broaden the focus in addressing financial capability, looking beyond asset building, with the inclusion of Bank On and its financial reach, beginning with a bank account to retirement as ways to assist families in need, move along a forward financial trajectory. Bank On, like the integration of asset building into financial empowerment, brings together local government, financial institutions, financial regulators, and community organizations to offer safe, affordable, and convenient financial services for our most vulnerable Washingtonians. Bank On Seattle-King County, launched in 2008, was second in a national movement to help people without bank accounts access affordable financial services, including checking, savings, credit, and financial education. The first Bank On was launched in San Francisco, so we are thrilled to have Jose Cisneros, Treasurer of City and County of San Francisco, and Molly Cohen, Interim Director, City of San Francisco, Office of Financial Empowerment. They're going to join us during day 2 of the forum, so don't miss that. New in 2019 was the addition of Bank On Washington as part of our statewide initiative of financial empowerment. The Financial Empowerment Network supports the Bank On national standards and works with local banks and credit unions to improve access to appropriate, low-cost, low-fee transactional accounts. To ensure that these new customers are successful, they must also have access to high-quality financial education and counseling that will help them move forward on the financial continuum. To that end, Financial Empowerment Network supports and promotes a vibrant Bank On learning community and offers continuing financial education to public, private, and nonprofit staff in the field. So we are absolutely thrilled to bring you our annual Bank On Washington Forum in 2020. Thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Becky House. Good morning, everyone. I am the Education, Communication, and Housing Director for American Financial Solutions, a division of North Seattle Community College Foundation. I'm also on the board of the Financial Empowerment Network and co-chair of Bank On Washington. Before we move on, I want to recognize 2 additional sponsors of our Bank On Forum, Bank of America and Umpqua Bank. You'll see their logos in the program guide and in the scrolling marquee as well. I'd like to say welcome again this morning, and I appreciate each and every one of you joining us today. The changes that we have experienced this year have been frustrating, yet very motivational, and heartbreaking, yet also inspirational. We, as a group, have the opening and the opportunity to, in the words of law professor and professor of African American Studies and Ethnic Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, John A. Powell, to stop othering and begin belonging. What does that mean? Othering occurs when a person or a group is not seen as a full member of society, as an outsider or less than, or inferior to other people or groups. Belonging is based on the recognition of our full humanity without having to become something different or pretend that we're all the same. We are always both the same, part of humanity, and different humans. And we're also dynamic, constantly renegotiating who we are. We hope that this forum both inspires and motivates us to reach deeper into our collective consciousness and find financial solutions that lead us closer to living in a more equitable society. So now I want to try to engage our brains a little bit and get our blood pumping. We're not going to do any yoga or any dancing, although you're more than welcome to if you want to. But we are going to play a little game. A game of test your knowledge. I have to say I was a little worried because some of the questions were tough for me, but then Alice reminded me that we have several bankers in the room, so they might not be that difficult. As we go through the questions, keep in mind the financial continuum that John was talking about, that ruler, the line that takes us from essentially birth to retirement. There are also questions in this that really center on using alternative banking methods, which is one reason we're all here today, to learn about how we can influence the system to be more inclusive. So there is a link on your screen. You're not going to be able to click that link, but I also sent out an email to everybody last night, and it said game on, bank on, or something to that effect. So if you open up that email, you can get in there and click the link. Otherwise, you can type the link into your browser. You can even do it on your phone if you want to do it on your phone. The address, you can see it there, is https://cvent, the letter C, vent.me, M-E, and then /2PVLO1. That's an O, not a 0. It'll take you to the questions, and it will ask for your name and your email address, and that is because 3 people who receive 100% will win a $50 gift card. Woohoo! And I can't play, so too bad for me. The winners will be selected using a random name picker and will be announced at tomorrow's event. And of course, also the winners will also receive an email. So let's open the link, type it in, and let's get started. So we'll walk through the questions one by one, and then we'll go through the answers. We have to be quick because otherwise Erwin's going to kick us out, and he's our next speaker. So let's start with number 1. Which of these 2 events has a greater chance of occurring? You win $50,000. You win a $50,000 Powerball payout after buying 1 ticket, or you get struck by lightning sometime in the next year. So one of those answers. All right. I'm going to be counting to 7 in between these questions. So number 2, a mutual fund that you hold drops in value by 20%. How much will it have to increase in value to return to its original price? A, 15%, B, 20%, C, 25%, or D, 5%? Okay. Next question. At your local bank, you have $300,000 in a joint account with your spouse, $100,000 in CDs in your name only, and in a safe deposit box, $50,000 in cash. A meteorite obliterates the bank, which fails. How much will the FDIC give you and your spouse? A, $250,000, B, $350,000, C, $400,000, or D, $450,000? Okay, number 4, you're figuring out how to invest your retirement savings. How many individual stocks do you need to own to have what's known as a diversified portfolio, the investment equivalent of not having too many eggs in one basket? A, 15, B, 30, C, 55, or D, 110? Okay. 5, among women in their 50s, which group is at greater risk of lower standard of living? Per a recent study by the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College. Either A, single women, or B, married women. All right, number 6, out of the blue, you receive a phone call from the IRS saying that you must pay $5,000 or you'll be arrested. What are the chances this call is legitimate? A, 0%, B, 50%, C, 75%, or D, 100%? All right. 7, according to the St. Louis Federal Reserve in 2017, the percentage of fully banked households using prepaid cards was 6.7%, B, 14.5%, C, 26.9%, or D, 42.7%. All right, number 8. Payday loans are marketed as helpful for meeting unexpected or emergency expenses. What percentage of people use payday loans for these purposes? A, 7 out of 10, B, 5 out of 10, C, 4 out of 10, or D, 3 out of 10? All right, number 9. The most used alternative financial services are which type? Transaction services, obtaining a money order or cashing a check somewhere other than at a bank or a credit union, or B, borrowing services like a payday loan, payday advance, pawn shop, etc. Okay, number 10, according to a report by the Federal Trade Commission, approximately how many people have an error on their credit report? A, 1 in 5, B, 2 in 5, 3, or C, 3 in 5, or 4, oh my gosh, D, 4 in 5. I shouldn't put numbers in orders like that. So 1, 2, 3, or 4 out of 5. Okay, last question. Which of the following is not a common fee charged on prepaid cards? A, a minimum transaction amount fee, B, a transaction fee, C, a balance inquiry fee, or D, a decline fee? All right, let's everybody pop in their answers and submit, and then we're going to go through what the answers are. So let's take a look here. Number 1, which of the 2 events has a greater chance of occurring? It is actually A, you win a $50,000 Powerball ticket. The chances of being hit by lightning are 1 in 1.2 million, but your chances of winning $50,000 at Powerball are better at 1 in 913,000. Sadly, you only have a 1 in 292 million shot at the jackpot. Okay, 2, the mutual fund that you hold drops in value by 20%. How much will it have to increase in value to return to its original price? It would have to increase in C, 25%. So if you look at it as shares cost $100, they fall 20%, so now they're worth $80. The $20 that's required to get back up to the $100 is a quarter, or 1/4 of 80, so 25%. Okay, 3, at your local bank, you have $300,000 in a joint account with your spouse, $100,000 in CDs in your name only, and in a safe deposit box, $50,000 in cash. The bank is destroyed and it fails. The FDIC will give you C, $400,000. The FDIC insures up to $250,000 per person per account type. So your $100,000 in CDs is covered, as are both you and your spouse's $150,000 portions of the joint account, since each portion is insured up to $250,000. The FDIC, though, does not cover safe deposit boxes, the contents in those. Too bad. Okay, 4, you're figuring out how to invest your retirement savings. How many individual stocks do you need to own to have a diversified portfolio? A 2014 study found that you need to have at least 110 stocks for maximal safety. Buying broad market mutual funds is potentially an easier way to diversify. Okay, 5. Among women in their 50s, which group is at a greater risk of lower standard of living in retirement, per a recent study by the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College? The answer is married women, and I got this wrong. One reason why, says the center, is that 2-earner couples tend to undersave for retirement. In about half of these couples, only one of the earners has a retirement plan and may not save enough to cover both spouses. Okay, number 6. Out of the blue, you get a call from the IRS saying that you must pay $5,000 or you're going to be arrested. The chances that this is legitimate is A, 0%. The IRS doesn't call to demand their payments, and neither does the Social Security Administration. We hear about both of those types of calls, and both would be scam calls. All right, let's see, number 7. According to the St. Louis Federal Reserve, in 2017, the percentage of fully banked households using prepaid cards was 6.7%. That's fully banked. 14.5% of households, underbanked households, use prepaid cards, and 26.9% of unbanked households were using prepaid cards in 2017. So there's a lot of room for a lot of market room there, I would think. Okay, number 8, payday loans are marketed as helpful for meeting unexpected or emergency expenses. What percentage of people use payday loans for these purposes? The answer is D. 3 out of 10 use them for unexpected or emergency expenses. 7 out of 10 are using these loans for basic expenses like meeting rent and utility payments. And that is scary. It's a very expensive way to meet those obligations. All right, number 9, the most used alternative financial services are which type? A, transaction services, so obtaining a money order or cashing a check somewhere other than at a bank or a credit union. So again, lots of opportunity there to design or think about other options for helping people so they don't have to pay just to get their money. All right, number 10, according to a report by the Federal Trade Commission, approximately how many people have an error on their credit report? The answer is 1 in 5. And I had heard a long time ago that 1 in 4 people had an error on their credit report that was significant enough to cause issues with obtaining credit or renting a home or an apartment. So I'm curious about that and need to dig a little deeper on that. But technically, our answer from the Federal Trade Commission is 1 in 5. Okay, and number 11, the last one, which of the following is not a common fee charged on prepaid cards? A, minimum transaction amount fee. I have to tell you, I was really shocked. I was trying to come up with all kinds of different ways to different fees that I could kind of throw in there. And if you go to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they have an article on there that says what types of fees do prepaid cards typically charge. And it's very, very shocking, all the different fees that are out there on prepaid cards. Not every prepaid card, but just, each one has their own what they use, but there's a lot of fees out there. So the answer for that was minimum transaction amount. So I hope everybody learned a little tidbit or two and maybe smiled once or twice as we went through these. At the end of today, again, we're going to pull the data from the questions and figure out our 3 winners, and we'll let everybody know. Thank you for playing if you played, and I really hope that you enjoy this forum. I am going to introduce now our plenary speaker, Erwin Reeves. Erwin is the Community Affairs Specialist with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, San Francisco Regional Office. Erwin helps community stakeholders bolster the economic inclusion of low-income communities in the Bay Area, California, Oregon, and Washington. He has over 30 years experience supporting community development that creates and implements programming for small businesses, nonprofits, and residents in low-income communities. Through his blended experience as a banker, volunteer, and board member, Erwin has focused on fostering collaboration between bankers, CDFIs, and community-based organizations, as well as municipal and academic service providers to support financial education, affordable housing, and access to capital. Mr. Reeves has a bachelor's degree in marketing from Jackson State University. He has also completed the National Community Development Lending School held at UC Berkeley, Strategy for Nonprofit Organizations held at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and the master's level extension program through Pacific Coast Banking School at the University of Washington. So welcome, Erwin.
Thank you, Becky, and good morning. As we get started, I need to acknowledge a few parameters for this presentation. The Community Reinvestment Act recognizes that each bank is different and that it takes into consideration the bank's performance, the communities it serves, its competitors, and its peers. For the purpose of this presentation, any reference to CRA is based on guidance provided in the interagency question and answers regarding community reinvestment dated July 15th, 2016. I have to officially tell you that this presentation represents the views of the speaker and not necessarily those of the FDIC, its management, or board of directors. In order to get an idea of our audience, please enter your primary service type into the chat, especially if you don't see it on this list. So if you're part of an asset building coalition, you may be in financial education, you may be in housing, but please enter that information on the chat. Thank you. So why is the FDIC interested in Bank on Washington? Our mission is to maintain stability and public confidence in the nation's financial system. In support of this mission, the FDIC insures deposits, examines and supervises financial institutions for safety and soundness, as well as consumer protection, make large and complex financial institutions resolvable, and manage receiverships. Since the start of FDIC insurance, no depositor has lost a single cent as a result of a bank failure. Community Affairs supports the FDIC's mission by fostering initiatives that support positive relationships between consumers and banks, increasing knowledge of CRA regulations and fair lending laws. We also provide technical assistance to financial institutions and community-based organizations to develop strategies that are responsive to credit, service, and investment needs in low-income communities. Bank on Washington fits into the insured deposit initiatives that you see represented on our economic inclusion ladder for this graphic. Now we're going to wait just a moment and allow you to continue to put a few more responses into the chat room. And Monet, I'll come back to you in just a moment. Financial education combined with the lived experience of managing a deposit account can change a person's financial identity, attitude, and overall financial wellness for the remainder of their life. Using the collective impact model, bank-on coalitions leverage resources, knowledge, and talent to elevate consumer awareness of and access to financial services. To be successful, collaboration is needed from a cross-section of community stakeholders, including, but not limited to, banks seeking CRA consideration under existing regulations, community-based organizations connecting low-income families with resources, and educators working to sharpen the skills of our future workforce. A true connection is key to successful collaboration, where true is defined as collaboration that is transparent, that happens in real time, is unconditional, and equitable. A true connection establishes a strong foundation that increases impact and sustainability as things change. Barriers are identified and addressed early in the development process and resolved for the mutual benefit of all parties, that is, sponsors, consumers, funders, and investors. Additionally, roles and responsibilities are documented to align with metrics and expectations. I'll come back to the concept of true connection later. Our objectives for Bank on Washington Forum are as follows. Collaboration among community stakeholders requires open and honest communication when developing impactful products and programs. Collaboration may include non-traditional partners, that is, people and organizations that you have not considered working with before, and implementing strategies that meet emerging community needs. And I want to emphasize emerging needs. 2020 has taught us what worked 2 months ago might not work now and may need to be altered again in the near future. Now, when we look at this graphic, we see the fundamental aspects of asset and wealth building. We do this work to help create economic stability for families that are usually left out of the equation. Before COVID-19, this graphic would represent a best case scenario for low-income families. This would be a success story. While this graphic shows housing as a sizable portion of expenses, we know for a fact this jar is not enough for many of your clients who spend well over 40% of their income to meet housing expenses. You see, the American dream starts here. We are very familiar with the promise of family stability, the humble abode with a picket fence. But the concept of housing continues to change as our economy changes, based on the type of jobs that are available, or the transportation needs of the workforce, especially when the employment is in rural locations or seasonal. And as soon as we think we have solutions, the needs and desires for housing change before our very eyes. We can't forget about the economic impact on local family businesses squeezed by international policies, causing the next generation to scale down or start over completely, literally taking their show on the road to survive another day in an ever-changing world. But we know that change creates opportunity where it did not exist before. Providing access to quote-unquote non-traditional roles, allowing the next generation to not only innovate, but also break down barriers. This graphic represents one approach that is very, very collaborative. But how do we continue to meet emerging needs of the employers? When a traditional view about workforce development still dominates the connection between education and employment. Think about how this graphic has changed real time across all socioeconomic categories as a result of COVID-19. What we see here is going to change dramatically and impact the way that we work together and develop our workforce going forward. Let's consider a student's perspective on saving.
My name is Danielle Covington, and I'm a recent graduate of New York University, class of 2020. I first started thinking about saving for college just when it felt about a little bit too late. I was in probably like late junior year, early senior year of college, and I was just starting to think about like where I actually wanted to go and realizing how much those universities actually cost that I had set my heart on. And so then I was like, okay, like I need to figure out how I'm going to be able to afford to go to school, or the schools that I had my heart set on. I think that the biggest barrier that I see a lot is just like a lack of mentorship. I know that I personally didn't have a lot of guidance when it came to like opening a savings account or learning how much college costs or even just planning for college early in general. And so I guess I wish that I had more people early on to guide me through the process of what that would be like. Okay, so I definitely don't think I would have listened, and I'm sure that lots of people were telling me this and I didn't listen. But I think that's because I didn't think of college as something that was a tangible thing that I was actually going to do until it came about junior and senior year. And so it wasn't until like I was actually applying for college that I realized like the actual numbers involved. And that's when I was like, okay, this is something this is something that I actually want, and now I have to like, you know, figure out how to fill the gap between what I have and what it costs. And so I wish I had more insight as to like what I wanted to do in life, what kind of colleges I might be interested in a little bit early on, so that I had a goal to shoot for and something to look forward to and work up to that was like a tangible number that I could personally see. Well, first I would want to get a job for myself. I didn't have a job early in high school, and I think that would have changed things a lot. But also, even if I did have a job, I think I would want some sort of program or like to join some sort of like cohort or mentorship program in which people who were actually doing this and like knew what they were talking about could take me through the steps of planning for college, understanding like the FAFSA and savings and scholarships and all of that. So I wish I had been a part of some community early on, especially with like-minded peers who might have also had their eyes on college during that time, so that we could sort of connect with each other and not feel like we were missing out on things because we were saving money and like had our minds geared towards the future. I think that if you want to go to college, there's definitely options for you. And one of the things that the biggest thing that I learned during my college application journey and figuring out how to pay for college was that so many unexpected sources came up when I was looking for help. And it wasn't until like the end of my senior year when I was able to have mentors and people who could walk me through the processes. And so once I realized like I really want to go to this school, but it's so much money, I was applying for a tons of scholarships, and I even paid for almost all of my first semester of college with completely outside funded scholarships than actually from my school. And once I had my heart set on it, I just asked people that I knew to help me, applied for everything I could, and like a miracle, lots of things opened their doors for me. So I would say like, don't give up. There's definitely so many options. And if you really want to go to school, there are ways to make that happen.
Monet, can you give us an update on the chat room responses, please?
Yes, Erwin. We have an equal balance of the primary service types: community development, housing, financial education, financial products and services, health and or social services, workforce development, and other. However, we do not have any small business listed within the chat feature. Thank you.
Thank you, Monet. Preparing the future workforce can take many shapes and requires out-of-the-box collaboration that includes end-user input to ultimately increase the impact of products, programs, and services. At the end of the day, families face challenges every day that are not covered by the safety net. Trust me when I say low-income families know how to budget. Every day they decide whether to buy food or pay rent, whether to pay for car repair or buy medicine, whether to buy winter clothes or pay utilities. let's take a moment to identify some of the barriers low-income consumers experience when trying to open deposit accounts. Again, please type your responses in the chat for barriers that you're familiar with that consumers experience when trying to open deposit accounts. Now let's go back to the concept of a true connection. Collaboration that is transparent, happens in real time, is unconditional, and equitable. Remember, a true connection establishes a strong foundation that increases impact and provides structure when things are changing rapidly. Let's take a quick look at how this form will help you create access and awareness to improve the financial well-being of unbanked and underbanked consumers. Transparent. An honest conversation about the limitations and barriers to accessing financial services where the lights may be on, but the door is not open for all consumers. Regardless of socio-economic status, all consumers need access to financial services, especially in the COVID era. This segment gives us the opportunity to look behind the veil and provide framework for honest dialogue that leads to structural change to deliver financial services, especially for low-income consumers. Transparency is key. Real time. Regardless of race, many low-income households don't have consistent internet access. And when they do, bandwidth is often insufficient to access services, particularly in rural and other remote geographies. The world as we know it is moving very fast every day. Faster and faster every day. In order to level the playing field, service providers have to grow with the change. This is not an easy task, nor is it cheap. But there are ways to increase capacity and institutional knowledge so clients have greater access to services. This segment will discuss how greater client access through the use of technology increases service delivery as well as the impact of services. Unconditional. 2020 has been quite a year, and we've got 2 months left before it's over. Every time we look up, there's something. Pandemic on top of systemic exclusion, on top of local nuance. And yet awareness and acknowledgement exist on varying levels. This is the right time for this segment to look at pre-existing conditions and assessing financial services response to racism, inequality, and COVID-19. We have another little surprise later on. Equitable. Money mindset is an important part of financial well-being and stability, especially when there's not enough money. And our relationship with money changes over time. Imagine learning to have a good relationship with money. Imagine being so comfortable with money that managing it is second nature. Imagine a money mindset. With that said, the tax season is around the corner. Given all that has taken place during this year, we must prepare for an unusual tax season. This session will discuss how COVID-19, among many other challenges, might impact low-income families and the organizations that serve them. Now, Monet, I'm not sure if you're ready for the chat yet, so we will, here we go. Tell us about our responses in the chat room, Monet.
Okay, we have a great deal of barriers. We have previously owned balance to another bank, may have proof of physical address, no financial institution in their community, past history, do not trust a financial institution, debt from bank or another bank, credit or financial history, check system record, identification requirement, being too young, historically more familiar with alternative options, poor confidence from historic marginalization, and there are many more. Bad credit or financial history, need for in-person signature instead of digital. And let's see, banking history, accessible transportation to branches. And let's see, having to meet with someone who doesn't understand the challenges of living on a low income. And there's many more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monet. That's a very broad list. But we're moving in a direction that can actually look like there's going to be some change. This came out yesterday. And when I'm talking about this change, we're seeing movement that's taking place on a rapid pace. I want to read a couple of quotes from the CEO of the American Bankers Association. This is the first one. Despite a strong and intensely competitive financial services industry, they now know, that millions of Americans and families of color in particular remain outside the mainstream banking system and are missing the economic opportunities that come from having a bank account. This is a chance to leverage opportunity. For my compliance and CRA officers, these comments will open doors in your conversations with executive management. For my service providers, as the door opens, prepare to engage. That is, document how you propose to create mutually beneficial collaboration. So it's not that you're just seeking CRA dollars, you're actually helping the bank with a line of business. You're actually allowing the bank to work along its mission and the goals that they have so that you can align those two with your mission and your objectives for your clients. The second quote, by offering bank-on certified accounts with the help of their core providers, America's banks can open doors of opportunity to new and returning customers, demonstrating the banking industry's commitment to financial inclusion. This is a statement we can literally take to the bank. Again, this is the American Bankers Association talking about opening doors of opportunity related to the very topics of our conference today and tomorrow and Thursday. We'll get in that plug later on. The timing couldn't be more perfect, but there is still much more work to be done. These are very powerful words, but if they are not connected to purposeful actions, they are merely words. We have to turn the words into action that includes implementation that leads to more accounts being open, that leads to greater financial stability for low-income communities. We have to take purposeful action in order to take full advantage of this. So what does that look like? The FDIC conducted a poll on safe accounts several years ago to test the viability of low-cost deposit accounts without overdraft features. I bring this up to serve as a historical perspective if your financial institution does not have low-cost deposit accounts or has concerns about providing a low-cost account. I just want to kind of run through some of the results very quickly, but the safe accounts actually performed better, on par, or better than some of the transaction accounts that the banks that were in this pilot were trying to support in just their normal course of business. Portions of the account holders remained banked during the year, which most financial institutions don't think that takes place. the cost of offering, and this is important, the cost of offering the safe accounts were roughly the same, if not lower, because they weren't checking accounts. They weren't regular checking accounts. They utilized checklist deposit or debit card, features in order to make it more efficient for the consumer, but the banks actually saved. And safe accounts enabled them to reach new customers and increase the use of financial products. So when we think about, especially that last statement, even though a low-income consumer is probably going to start and may stay at those basic accounts for a period of time, they will ultimately start to use other products within the financial institution. From a competitive standpoint, if you don't get these consumers at the beginning of their life and moving forward with financial services, you may not have the opportunity to get them as customers as they move up the socioeconomic ladder. You may not have the opportunity to engage with them when they're ready to buy their home, when they need a car loan. And those are staples for most financial institutions as it relates to how they build their business and how they move forward. I mentioned action almost repeatedly after the American Banker Association quotes. And so we really need to think about how to put things in place. I'd like to introduce to you the before action review. This is a concept, or better yet, a mindset, where the planning and the development of a project, process, or program targets the end goal early in the development process, whereby barriers and challenges are identified so they can be addressed, mitigated, or absorbed before anything has been implemented. It's not perfect, but it is flexible and can be adapted across numerous sectors to increase the impact in the delivery of service, programs, and products. So as it relates to Bank on Washington, we want to actively look at the purpose and the objective of the work. Visualize success, that is, naming the expectations and outcomes based on the project purpose. Not just identify the challenges, but actively seek solutions in support of the purpose and the success of the project. Figure out how these challenges can be mitigated or absorbed to support success. Using our experience, clients' feedback, and data to learn how to improve the process and deepen the impact. Imagine it, planning for success based on learned experience, real time, with client feedback in support of agreed upon objectives and metrics. The results of the one-year pilot that I mentioned previously suggest that opportunities for financial services to offer safe, low-cost transaction accounts to underserved consumers is very vast. So let's apply a few of the metrics for the before action review. And in the next slides, I will do an overlay of that before action review over the safe account pilot as an example of how the two can be integrated or used to develop the framework for bank on certified accounts. In this first metric, what is the purpose, the objective? We know that the intention was to open accounts. And so what we have here is that 3,500 accounts were opened in that 1 year. You can see there the split between transaction accounts and savings accounts, but we can say that they met their objective. What does success look like? Again, we are looking, from the rearview mirror, so it's hindsight that we're putting forward. But if we apply the same metrics and look at how we can plan to develop and implement and get folks to accounts, we can use this as the framework to get that done. And so success was getting account retentions. And so banks in the pilot were able to retain 81% of transaction accounts and 95% of savings accounts during the pilot. Those are great successes and lead to access for other services within the financial sector for low-income consumers. The challenges institutions experienced during the pilot primarily focused on marketing and advertising, establishing a presence in a new market, and ensuring adequate staff training, adequate staffing as well. But we know that if you create a product and create a nice brochure, but don't tell anyone about it, you're not going to get any traction. You're not going to open accounts. So in order to reach customers, there has to be a concerted effort to bring that bank on certified account into your mainstream marketing. As service providers, you can help those financial institutions understand how they can market towards your clients in order to improve the effectiveness of their marketing. But most importantly is training the staff at the retail branches, the stores, whatever you want to call it, so that they know about the products, the benefit of the products, so that when customers come in, they're actually able to take advantage of that, and the customer and the bank staff know exactly what they're talking about. They're on the same page. So that's a challenge that needs to be addressed. What did we learn from last time? Now, we just talked about training tellers and customer service representatives regarding the bank on certified accounts. We know that that training is key, but it has to take place throughout that entire office. Everyone should know about this. We also know that the risks are relatively low for overdrafts and fraudulent behavior. And part of that is on the service providers because they are doing the financial education and training. They are bringing the customers in line with what makes sense for the banks and its operation. And then we know that the template for the FDIC model safe accounts, again, while not perfect, provides a framework that is flexible to use in a variety of circumstances. So how can you wrap your arms around this? We have already some examples that can be laid out that can be used to help supplement the work that's taking place with Bank on Washington, in addition to the national account standards. So when we combine all of this, we have the framework enabling us to learn so that we can move forward even faster. What will make us successful this time? And this is a question I want you to think about for just a moment. We're going to go into some of those things in just a second. But what will it take for us to be successful this time? Doesn't mean we haven't had some success in the past, but how can we increase the magnitude of that? How can we get more low-income consumers participating in the financial services, mainstream sectors? I'll tell you. These are our desired outcomes. It is imperative that we build strong relationships among banks, schools, CBOs, CDFIs, and government. I'm going to go back. CBOs is community-based organizations, and you could be an asset building coalition. You could be a foundation. You could be a municipal service provider. That's that broader category. And CDFIs are community development financial institutions. But when strong relationships are established among this core group, collaboration increases. When collaboration increases, impact increases, which means more people are served, more people are helped, and there's more success. Integrate financial education into high school curriculum. I know that's something that the state of Washington is interested in doing. There is so many benefits for that happening. And it starts that continuum because students learn about financial services early on, are able to apply those lessons to their adulthood, which means we have more people having full benefit and access to financial services, to mainstream financial services. This is something that I want, is to increase financial institution participation in Bank on Washington. One more time, banks, it's called Bank on Washington. We need your participation. And what do you get out of it? You're able to identify and implement investment, lending, and service strategies eligible for consideration under existing CRA regulations. I want to be clear. The Bank on Washington Forum is not just about our segment on free tax advice or the great coffee breaks that are coming up. They're absolutely great. What we want is impact. There's some actionable items that will get the ball rolling, but participating in Bank on Washington is a great opportunity. We have some key recommendations. Early planning. I can't emphasize it enough. I hesitate a little bit there because I've said it so many times, but I know that it's very important. I know that you know it's important. Develop and design programs collaboratively with end users so that we're not missing the mark, so that we're actually running through what needs to take place and satisfying the needs of those customers. The other thing would be to engage the entire household whenever possible. And households are different. Can't just think of that television nuclear family anymore. We have multi-generational housing that exists. We have guardians that are doing as good a job or as well or better than parents. We have all kinds of circumstances where we need to make sure that we're considering what a household means, and then how do we engage them so we can optimize their access to financial services. Document the expectations. Put these things up front when you're developing your partnerships, because it's important to understand the roles. It's important to understand the costs. It's also important to understand success. When implementing the programs and measuring effectiveness, those things have to come together. And once all of that takes place, assess and refine the program for stability. It's very important to make sure that we're doing all of these things on a timely basis. So if we can pull everything together, it's important for us to make sure that we're sticking to not just these key recommendations, but also preparing ourselves. And I'm just going to flash back this one more time here on these desired outcomes, because I think that it's important for you to remember that it starts with relationships. It starts with integration. Financial institutions, we need your participation. And there is opportunity for you within that segment. Please help me by sending special thanks to my colleague, Monet Boswell, for her support with the chat during this presentation. Remember, your participation in Bank on Washington can help lower the cost of financial services for low-income households so they can keep a few more dollars in their pockets to meet basic household needs. Thank you for your time and engagement. Here's my contact information. Thanks again.
Hello, everyone. I am Amanda Policelli, and I'm here to talk to you today about an exciting and new streaming platform brought to you by FPP called Spondulix, and I will be its host. So what is Spondulix? Coined from the 19th century term meaning pocket change, Spondulix is a new streaming platform brought to you by the FPP in order to encourage financial capability for the generation that receives all their content and entertainment completely online. It's financial edutainment. Personal finances with an educational and entertainment value attached. The purpose of Spondulix is to elevate financial capability for all. It's a no-cost, no-risk method for learning. And it's completely free. Yes, you heard me right. Free. Spondulix will be accessible via the website you are on right now, Amazon Fire TV, Android Mobile, Android TV, Apple TV, Roku channel app, as well as audio-only channels. Spondulix will be launching this fall, very soon. We will have 4 channels: Spondulix English, Spondulix Spanish, Spondulix Live, and Spondulix Practitioners for financial capability practitioners. Spondulix is made possible with the support of investors, content providers, and those who are eager to expand their knowledge every day. As of right now, the platform has received support from Co-America Bank, CIT Bank, and Florida Blue Foundation. If you are interested in providing support, please contact the FBP today. We are also looking for content providers. So if you are currently producing content and are interested, please contact the FBP today.
Good morning, everyone. It's time for a short break. Just enough time to stretch a little, refill your cup of coffee or tea in my case. But before you head out, allow me to introduce myself and share a few thoughts with you. My name is Carmen Martilla. I am the Senior Director of Development for Junior Achievement of Washington. I am also a member of the Financial Empowerment Network's Financial Trainers Task Force. Back in 2018, the Financial Empowerment Network convened a regional trainers task force to vet existing curricula, develop criteria for trainers, review and recommend workshop pricing strategies, and to provide advice for continuing financial education for nonprofit professionals in Washington State. In your program, you will find the course catalog under Resources. This catalog is a compilation of workshops offered over the past 6 years and some new courses introduced by the task force members. On page 2 of the course catalog, you will find a training titled Guide to Presenting a Financial Education Workshop. The purpose of this training is to provide information on how to deliver the 2018 FDIC Money Smart Adults curriculum to a diverse audience in a wide range of situations, to create an engaging and practical learning experience for your participants. We want to give a special thank you to Erwin Reeves for the resources that the FDIC provides to practitioners. We thank you so much. We are so grateful and appreciative of the partnership and support. As we break, I would like us to consider needs versus wants. If you were going to the moon for an extended period of time, what would you take? Would you primarily take things that you need or things that you want? Think about that. As families struggle to make ends meet during the COVID-19 health crisis, the FDIC Money Smart Pre-K through second grade is a resource to consider. Module 3 introduces the subject of needs versus wants, and it's a tool that you can share with parents you are working with who have small children at home. But this is also a very timely subject for adults to consider. Finally, during this break, I am introducing to you a short film on financial inclusion that focuses on the barriers and solutions to being unbanked in Washington State. The film was produced by DECA student filmmakers at Issaquah High School. Enjoy.
Hi, I sent in an application earlier, and I was wondering if there was any other way I can get paid than direct deposit.
No, I'm sorry. Is that not an option for you?
I don't have a bank, so
I'm sorry. I can get your application just in case and see what I can do. Hello? Is this Sam? Yeah, it's Elena from The Beam. I know you said you didn't have a bank account, but I actually did some research and there's this amazing program called Bank On. Yeah, one of its core functions is actually deposit capability, which includes not only direct deposit, but free cash and checks in branch and at an ATM. Yeah, and they have a lot of other core features like offering a transaction account at a banking institution. That includes a checking account. So that way you can manage the money you make here too. Yeah, for sure. No worries. Hope to see you there.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the film. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Ann Price, President of Insight. Ann will be discussing her February 2020 paper, Don't Fixate on the Racial Wealth Gap, Focus on Undoing Its Root Causes. Ann is the first woman president of the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. She previously served as director of the Closing the Racial Wealth Gap Initiative at Insight and was one of the first national thought leaders to examine and push for narrative change in addressing race, gender, and wealth inequity. She has worked in the public sector on a wide range of issues, including child welfare, hunger, welfare reform, workforce development, community development, and higher education. Prior to joining the Insight Center, Ann served as project director to California Tomorrow's Community College Access and Equity Initiative, and also spent several years at Seattle's Human Services Department, where she served as the Community Development Block Grant Administrator and a strategy advisor for the director. Ann's work has been featured in the New York Times, The Nation, The Washington Post, The Mercury News, City Lab, O Magazine, and the Stanford Social Innovation Review, along many other publications. She has appeared on MSNBC and Noticias Telemundo, and is a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute in New York. She also currently serves as board chair at United for a Fair Economy in Boston. And finally, Ann holds a BA on economics from Hampton University and a master's degree in urban affairs and public policy from the Milano School of Management and Urban Policy in New York City. Join me in giving a warm welcome to Ann Price. Ann, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm really great. It's a great pleasure to be with you this morning to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is racial wealth and equality. I want to talk a bit this morning about a paper I wrote recently this year that really was a way to shift the conversation away from the way we focused on building assets in a new direction. It's really about thinking about the structural and root causes of racial wealth and equality, and the fact that I really feel that we need to take a new course of action to move in a whole new direction. And I want to talk with you about that a bit this morning. Next. So, we hear a lot about this tremendous chasm particularly between Black households and white households. And we know that that gap is continuing to widen. And so we haven't really made tremendous progress in this nation to really narrow the gap between people of color and whites. Today, it stands about $150,000 between Latinx and Black households and white households. And we know that the gap is slightly larger for Black households. Next. So when looking at this, and let me just say, it's really difficult to really get wealth data. It's not really broken down by local jurisdiction. Most of it's national. It's not adequately disaggregated, so we don't really see how this plays out, particularly in Asian and Latinx households. And we break those down by groups, whether they're Vietnamese or Cambodian or Chinese. We see dramatic differences that get masked when we group everyone together. The same is true for Latinx households. When we disaggregate Puerto Ricans from Mexican Americans, from Salvadorians, we also see tremendous differences. And so this was really some data that was looking at Seattle. And it's really just an illustration. It's kind of what we've seen across the country, where you will see these very big gaps between some communities of color and white households and sometimes Asian households. So what we're talking about here is nothing small in the least. We're talking about a history that's created really big gaps in wealth. Next. So I want to point out that when we think about how people actually build wealth, that this is really something that is intergenerational. And so when we think about how a child comes into the world, it really is a great predictor for how they will live their adult lives, how much wealth they can accumulate based on the families that they're born into. I think this myth of, people who are born into the poorest families and then are able to move their way up into some of the highest wealth families is truly a myth that rarely happens, and it certainly doesn't happen by race. So this chart is basically showing that 2 out of 5 Black children are born into a family that has no assets. And it's quite a big difference in the way that we look at assets for white households. It's almost a flip, right? So that thinking about the fact that a diverse portfolio was really what's required to really build wealth and hold on to wealth, that 3 or more assets really gives us a good idea about the fiscal health of a family. So you can see that one, a lot of families don't have 3 assets or more, but there's stark differences by race. Next. So I think in order for us to move in a really different direction, we're going to have to actually pull back the curtain on the creation of wealth. And literally kind of what we really see, particularly in the media, and kind of how stories have been perpetuated, really is built on individualism, right? And it's not really rooted in the history and the root causes of why people have wealth, some families, and why others don't. And so I think for us as both practitioners, as leaders, that we're going to have to do a better job of pulling back this curtain. Next. So when I think um, about wealth and racial wealth and equality, I really look at it as like the roots of a tree, right? And what we're often focused on are the branches, are the leaves, but it's actually the foundation of the tree, that's underneath the ground often. Sometimes it's above ground, but it's the roots that are holding everything up. It's the roots that we often invisibilize. And that's where we need to really put our attention, because really it's the historical policies and decisions that were made decades ago that continue to manifest today. And in order for us to really get at the best solutions, we're going to have to be better on understanding those historical manifestations, how they're playing out, and how they play out in various communities. Next. So I want to talk a little bit about how I think we can do that better. And in the latest paper that I authored, I offer a number of ways in which we can look at wealth that we've typically not thought about. And one of them is really thinking about corporate power and how corporate power is a major driver of racial wealth and equality in numerous ways. I mean, first we can think about the power of corporations in the workplace. And we're seeing it today, and thinking about what's happening during the pandemic with paid, sick leave, that many workers do not have the kind of worker protections, do not have the kind of escalators that will take them to a level of financial security. And this type of the stronghold that corporations have in our economy, and why we're seeing such unequal wealth, is a driver that we often don't highlight. We can take the real estate market as an example and think about the role that it played during the last recession in really resulting in people having their homes taken. And that is really due to the political power in which corporations have, to deregulate laws and rules over time. That's really had a big impact on wealth and income. So really thinking about corporate power and how it's intertwined with even public power, right? The role that governments at all levels play in working with corporations or doing the work of corporations in many ways plays a role, particularly when we think about wealth extraction. And the whole subject of saying we need to be focusing on plunder is something I'm really focusing on right now, because I think we are missing that side of the equation. And it's such a big factor in thinking about current day racial wealth and equality. Next. So one of the ways that we really, when I really think about corporate power, one of the way that it's really manifested is through debt. And, we think about debt in various ways, but it really is the fact that we have two kinds of debt. And this was really created from the New Deal, right? The New Deal actually created unequal credit markets. What it did was it gave high interest, non-banking installment lending for Black folks, and low cost, secure revolving credit for white people. And it was established decades ago, and it still manifests today. And we have to understand how debt plays this role in terms of racial outcomes. It's interesting because we often think about debt as private, and we need to start thinking about debt as public. It's not just a private phenomena that happens in individual families. It is quite public. And because debt is also considered shameful, we don't really, think about the fact that white people often see their assets and access to credit as a privilege, right? And the fact that Black folks often don't see their indebtedness as an act of injustice. And that's where we're going to have to do some shifting some of our thinking, right? So let me just hone in on this point a little bit, right? If you think about this historically and the fact that debt in itself has become an anchor for white mobility, but has become a ball and chain for Black folks. This is what we're really seeing today and why we see such low levels of wealth among Black people and some other communities of color as well, right? Go back historically, that basically that white wealth and the way that whites have been able to build wealth has been predicated on Blacks having debt. And it seems somewhat counterintuitive to think that debt in itself can be a boost for wealth. But when we think about how particularly white people have been able to use that as a mechanism for mobility, because it's given them access through many mechanisms. Even when we think about home mortgage deduction, that it's played a bigger role. But when we look at what's happened with Black folks, that they're still in markets where they're not getting access to mainstream credit, that they're still relying on predatory kinds of products in all sorts of ways, and that debt does not actually lead to a better future, right? And that's how we really think about what used to be good debt and bad debt, right? That good debt was a mechanism for mobility. And it has been for some groups, but for others, it has not, it actually has made their lives much worse. We can look at student debt as a perfect example of that, right? From 2001 to 2013, Black student debt tripled, while white student debt doubled. And we can see now that for some families, particularly Black families, doing the right things, studying hard, going to college, has really made their lives financially worse off. And it's so counterintuitive to everything that we ever believed about education, right? We know that single Black women under the age of 40 essentially have no wealth, single Black women with a college degree, right? That is not the story that we often think of in terms of our future of Americans, that education is supposed to be an equalizer, it's supposed to be a mobility builder, but it is not turning out to be that way for many communities of color. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. You know, one of the ways that we have to think, I think, moving out of this recession that we're in and, you know, making more visible is the role of gender and the intersection of gender and race and wealth. And there are so many reasons we need to think about this much more than we do right now. First of all, we are in a crisis. We're in a women's recession. We know recent data has shown that nearly over 800,000 women have left the labor market. And why have they left the labor market? Because they found it impossible to actually work, care for children and others. And this is really a deep warning sign for us right now. But let's think about this in terms of wealth. We know that really it wasn't until the mid-70s that women actually were able to kind of get credit on their own, were granted permission to actually obtain credit cards without a husband, without bringing a man to the bank with them, and asking a barrage of questions like, do you plan to have children? You know, are you married? Do you plan to marry? I mean, it seems crazy, but we do know now, even with that, the laws being passed, that women still have, still pay half a point higher percentage, you know, in credit card interest than men. But there's all sorts of ways when we think about unsecured debt. I just named student debt as a perfect example of that. But there's other ways as well. What we have to think about is that women have become such prime breadwinners for their family, particularly women of color. Black women make up 68% of the breadwinners or co-breadwinners of their family. So really knowing the role that Black women play in the wealth of their households is so critical, right? we have to think about occupational segregation, and that is really how women are packed into jobs unnaturally given their education and experience. These women's jobs that tend to pay less than male dominated jobs, that tend to have less access to benefits that will help people build wealth, like pensions, right? That these things all come together to really harm families when we think about wealth. Bankruptcy is another example. We know that even new bankruptcy laws could potentially harm women make it more difficult for them to file for bankruptcy. It will probably have a disproportionate impact on women. And we also know that Black women, for example, are steered into the worst types of bankruptcy, right? Chapter 13 bankruptcy instead of Chapter 7. It's been shown that when you look at Black households in Black zip codes, that they are pushed much greater percentages into Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So I'm bringing this up to say that there are a myriad of intersections that are at play right now that really will tell us what we need to do about our economy and what we need to do in terms of digging in on the root causes of racial wealth inequality. I talked a little bit about debt, and when you think about FICO scores, for example, and know that Black and Latinx households are more likely to be in credit invisible, right? Meaning that they have absolutely no credit record at rates much higher than whites and Asians, and that they're also have records which we can't even establish a credit score. So this is telling us this kind of history that's tampering down, that both affects race and affects gender. Next slide. So I think one of the things that we're going to have to begin to do is think about connecting dots that we don't see right now when we think about building wealth and building assets and thinking about credit. One of them is certainly mass incarceration. And I think this is a dot that although we know that there are people who are serving those who are coming out that were formerly incarcerated, that are working with individual families, that this tie to both race and gender plays a major role in why we're seeing some low wealth levels in communities of color. And we're not necessarily making those connections. And we're also siloing that work, right? There's people who work on criminal justice reforms that we don't actually tap into as much. So let me talk about that for a second, because this is really showing how racialized wealth is and what's actually driving that. So we know, for example, that millennials are a generation that came of age during mass incarceration, and that they are more likely to have an interaction with the criminal legal system, are seeing their parents. And this has shaped generational wealth, particularly in communities of color, so differently than what we thought about even 20 years ago. But it really plays out very differently. So, for example, we looked at wealth levels among millennial women, white women, and women of color, and saw that, for example, that if a woman's incarcerated across race, they just generally have low levels of wealth. So in some ways, maybe incarceration does kind of flatten wealth and really result in low wealth for all folks. But when we think about an arrest, which doesn't mean necessarily that you are guilty of a crime, that plays a bigger role. And we know that 70 million Americans have arrest records, right? So we found that basically a white woman who's been arrested, who's under the age of 30, has more wealth than a Black woman who's never been arrested, right? The thing that's so important to think about when we really look at wealth is that many things are very counterintuitive. The narratives that we tell ourselves about what should build wealth does not play out the same in communities of color. particularly for Black and Latinx families, right? It just is almost the opposite. So we would expect people who've had an arrest to maybe have lower levels of wealth. But the reality is that system doesn't penalize white families in the same way that it does Black families and Latinx families. So thinking about the role that mass incarceration plays for a generation, how it dampens wealth, how it does that particularly for people of color and even women that we often don't look at, is an important way to connect some of these dots. Next. One of the things I really want to talk about and what we must do to get at root causes of racial wealth inequality is narrative shift. And narratives are really, the ways in which we see the world, the frames in which we actually make sense out of our lived experience. And so we know that in America, there are some very dominant frames. And one of the most dominant frames is the bootstraps narrative, right? That you can just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That actually it's grit and resilience that actually contributes and leads to success, leads to the ability to build wealth. And this very faulty narrative that really that billions of dollars have been poured into this narrative. There's no accident that we believe in this narrative because we've heard it all of our lives. It's very familiar to all of us. But what's so harmful is not only how people absorb and take on that narrative. I've heard many folks in very low income struggling communities talk about they haven't been able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And what that does, it ignores everything structural, everything I just talked about, right? I mean, we have to remember that the reason that we have mortgages, why they were created, was to subsidize the slave trade. That we subsidized and gave state subsidies to white families to build wealth. People didn't do it on their own. That people build wealth mainly through the fact that the government has provided land, provided low interest mortgages over generations. That's how people build wealth. But we have given this narrative so much credence that we have designed programs around it. We've designed the way that we help families, right? Because what it's saying is that we will fix you, right? Like you have to do something better. You have to stop buying lattes. You have to budget better, right? You have to learn how to save in order for you to build wealth. And that narrative is so harmful to particularly communities of color, but it's harmful to all families, right? Because it ignores the structural. And it says that everything that you do is individual, right? It's an individual effort. And as long as we believe that narrative, then we don't have to ever fix the many rules and laws that have gotten us here in the first place. We can just continue to try to fix people and tell them that something is wrong with them. So overcoming this narrative is one of the biggest ways we can dig in and think about getting at the root causes of why we're seeing such low wealth levels in communities of color. Next. So I want to just point out how these narratives work. And I'm going to do this somewhat quickly, and I'm sorry for that for the sake of time. But understand that the bootstraps narrative, which is really our kind of asset building narrative, certainly is an overlay of how we function, how we make investments. Why do we see such great investments in entrepreneurship, right? Why do we believe that? And I think there is, not that we don't think that people should have businesses, that's not it. But it is an individual effort to build wealth, right? And I think that that's one reason we believe so heavily in it. The other narratives that are really important, and I talked about personal responsibility, and we have started to call it toxic individualism, right? Because it's not an individualism or it's not a personal responsibility that says, yes, I want my child to do great in school. It has some very negative kind of behavioral characteristics that really find people to be very faulty. The other two narratives, personhood and work. And what this narrative is about is that Americans fundamentally believe that you are not a full human being if you're not working. That somehow you are morally corrupt, that you have to work hard, of course, but actually helping you is actually contributing to your moral deficiency. So that's where you get this kind of handout thinking, right? The people should not get handouts because it's predicated on the belief that people must work. But behind that narrative are some very deeply racist tropes about who wants to work and how they work. And that really leads us to deep kind of racial resentment and anti-Blackness. So Americans, still fundamentally believe that Black people are lazy and that they're cheats, right? And those narratives really lead to policies that punish. And that's why we see such punitive social safety net policies, for example, and why it's so difficult for families living on the margins to actually make it, to even get to a point where they can even build wealth, right? And so we have to pay attention to these narratives because they actually are not innocent at all. They are driving public policy that shapes people's lives in real time. Next slide. I am going to kind of conclude with this slide around narrative, because this was actually an image that was put on the cover of Bloomberg News right after the Great Recession. And it was deeply offensive, as you can tell. It's caricatures of Black and Latinx people as homeowners. And clearly, it shows them in such negative ways of being irresponsible, of taking unnecessary risks, not knowing how to budget, all of those kinds of things that actually lead us to think that people need much more financial literacy. And why this is an important image is because it totally gave us a narrative about the Great Recession and the fact that we had a foreclosure crisis. It did not talk about deregulation as a way to actually extract wealth from Black and Latinx families. That was no accident. It just didn't happen suddenly. It was put into place over a number of years. And so what this image did is it obscured any kind of structural issues that had to do with the Great Recession and the foreclosure crisis. And today, that narrative still stands. It still largely stands that we believe that certain groups were irresponsible. And so I'm concluding there to show that these are perpetual narratives that drive racial wealth inequality. And in order for us to actually move in a new direction, we're going to have to tackle these narratives. I think that's the last slide. Is that correct? That's it. Thank you, Ryan. So I am just going to end by saying this, right? We're at a critical moment where we can decide whether we're going to have an inclusive set of financial rules and policies and systems that will help communities of color build wealth, or we will continue in a way to build on approaches that are fostered on individualism, that are built on the notion that people need to be fixed, that obscure structural reasons, and do not look at how debt mechanisms have been codified and put in place to allow some families to actually become more mobile and build wealth, and for others to be cemented in place. We're in a moment of true reckoning. And I think for us to take this on, we're not just saying that this will help communities of color, certainly it will, but will help all struggling Americans who are caught up in systems that actually punish, that systems that are built on predation. And until we actually do that, we can't just continue to say that people can get access to mainstream financial services and products, right? We push on that so hard and not realizing that the system itself is so deeply flawed and is constructed to extract. is constructed to be built in this way, and to understand that we have a system, whether it's our housing market and our real estate system, our credit market, that actually benefits from discrimination and segregation and redlining, and that some people's wealth is obtained by making sure others are either extracted or hampered. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm back just to talk for a couple of minutes before we bring on Becky about solutions and how we can focus on solutions to thinking about racial wealth and equality. And so oftentimes it's easy to lay out, wow, these are the sets of problems, and they're deeply seated and they're structural and they're longstanding. But what do we begin to do about them? And so I'm just going to lay out a few thoughts, right, that we can begin to really think about how we can begin to tackle racial wealth and equality, how we can do that in our work right now. So let me just start. I really ended talking about narratives. So let me just start by talking about that, because it's really hard to say, well, what am I going to do? I may realize that this bootstraps narrative is harmful, but what do I do about that in my own work? So I think that one of the things that is really important, and I know it's something that actually I started to do in working on this issue some years ago, is to start to say, is my work actually contributing to harms? And what I did was actually worked with a cognitive scientist, a linguist, to examine the language that I was using in my written materials, in my communication strategies, in the way that I was actually putting forward solutions. And so what I discovered is really how harmful the language I was using was to my cause. That actually I wasn't doing great by pushing forward solutions that people, one, couldn't buy into, but also reinforce some of the same types of even stereotypes that I was trying to counter. And so I think one of the easiest things that we can do around narrative, because creating counter narratives is no easy thing. We need a much bigger strategy to counter these dominant narratives, is to take a look at your own work. We actually work with someone who we worked with in a community of practice with 12 organizations, and hired someone to look at all of our websites, for example. And what we found was shocking to all of us at this point. At least we had done that years prior, but other organizations really found that their language is actually quite harmful. It's easy to stop using harmful language. Once we identify it, we can stop. And I think it's just a good starting place, because what it does, it just makes you hyper aware of how narratives are being used. And you don't have to be a linguist. You can start to spot it and see it for yourself, how it's actually undermining the very work that you're starting to do. So being able to find an entity that can help you examine your language and to replace even some basic language with new language could be a great start. The other way is to really think about the lived experience. And I know that many people work with clients and sometimes survey those clients, but we often don't really dig in deep to understand, kind of the intersections of their lives and how they play out. So I really do believe we need better research, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at academic institutions. When we have access to people, we can actually begin to gather a great understanding, particularly around predation. Now, if we're going to understand plunder, and if plunder really tells us how we got to where we are, we can really begin to do that through constituencies and clients that we work with. The reason we haven't collected great data there, I think, is because we're not asking the right questions. We're not really asking how people interact with systems, how they work, what kind of services and products they receive, and how they actually survive. And I think it's really important to understand that the reason we're seeing, for example, such high student debt, the reason we're seeing people flooding, particularly women, into the space of entrepreneurship is because our labor market system is not working in the way that help people survive. And people are trying to survive in many ways. I think about Black women who are trying to forge businesses to actually sell to other struggling communities as a way of giving back, but also of a way of survival, and yet are still are finding that they're getting some predatory products, even predatory business loans, right? So this is all done because people are seeing that wages are stagnant. And so, the messages go to school, get a degree. The messages go out and start a business, right? And so understanding what is driving people to make certain decisions about the fact that they're trying to do better for their family and how they interact with systems could tell us a lot about solutions, right? We are not building solutions based on a lived experience, based on the fact that in many communities of color, it's not just about my individual household. It is about my parents. It's about my siblings. And there's a deeper community connection there that we're not also picking up on, that just don't fit into mainstream financial products and services. So we can do a better job there. I would say, thirdly, we need greater innovation. We need money for innovation. We need to test new ideas. We need to find better ways to address this chasm. And I think that if we were able to see organizations who are working so hard to serve people go out on a limb a little bit and are able to experiment and innovate a bit more, we might see a better result. So innovation is really important, and we need all sorts of, whether that's the private sector or public sector, to step up to do that. And then I will just close by saying, look, we can't continue to work in a silos, right? One of the things that we did not work on the criminal legal system at the Insight Center, but we're really concerned about debt and saw that criminal fees and fines are a debt anchor, right? And so we started to work with people working in the criminal legal system, working with clients, work with legal aid organizations, work with other nonprofit folks to really dig in and deal with criminal legal fees. And so this diverse coalition in California was able to eliminate, the governor just signed, $16 billion of 23 fees that are imposed on people who have been involved in the criminal legal system. Not all of the fees, just 23. That's $16 billion. And what we found, we saw the real life impact was a story of an impacted person who said, I am now getting $800 back to me a month that used to be garnished because of this fee. That's quite significant in the life of a struggling American to have that kind of money come back in their pockets. And so I would say that although, we might say that's not the work that I do, I think that we can play a major role in working with others that can also take on and lift for us if we're stretched. This idea of de-siloing our approach and thinking about the myriad of ways in which wealth is extracted. So I'm going to stop there with those sets of solutions I think that are kind of low-hanging fruit that we can begin to forge upon in this work. And now turn it over to Becky. Thank you, Becky, and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Oh, let me make sure. Hopefully you can see my screen and you can hear me. Welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. This is the second time I've heard Ann Price talk, and both times, I mean, I'm always blown away, and it's great. I think the more we hear these things, the more that we get this information, and the more that our kind of ingrained ideas and thoughts are challenged, the the easier it becomes to start to implement that with the people that we're working with, and to really embrace the differences. That's one of the things that Anne mentioned, you know, the lived experiences. When you think about, I just did a training with a group of AmeriCorps people at United Way, and one of the things we spent some time discussing was, you know, thinking in terms of the people that are coming to see you. They don't need a hand up or a hand out. What they're looking for is someone to help them build on their strengths. And that's where they're coming from. You know, they've survived. Looking at it, my perspective is that this person has survived up until this point where our lives intersected. So my goal is to use the strengths that they're bringing to the table to try to help them continue on a forward trajectory, I guess, if you will. So anyway, I don't know. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot there to think about. And the more, you know, the more you listen and the more you're, you know, you think about things and the way that we all manage our own careers or work or however you want to term it, the more opportunities you see for trying to help adjust what goes on in our society and our institutions, whether it's, you know, financial institutions or government institutions or whatever type it is. Okay, I'm going to move on off of that. I got a couple quick questions here. Please feel free to answer these in the chat, which I might be able to see. I hope I can. Let me refresh here and see if I can. Okay, so here we go. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. What is the most common reason cited for bankruptcy? Isn't that interesting? We were just talking about that. So we have medical debt or job loss. What do we have? Medical debt and job loss due to illness, divorce or separation, unexpected expenses such as earthquakes, floods, or tornadoes, so big time expenses, or difficulty controlling spending. Any answers there? No, I'm not going to be able to see. There we go. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Okay, what do we got? B, C, D, A, D. Yes, the answer is, let me get my laser pointer, is A, medical debt and job loss due to illness. That is our number one reason cited for bankruptcy. All of these, A, B, C, and D, are reasons that were cited for bankruptcy. But again, that was our number one. All right, let's take a look at the next one here. Net worth. Net worth is equal to our total assets plus liabilities, our total assets minus liabilities. Which one would this be? A, B, or C? Yes, look at, you guys are all so smart. A household's net worth is calculated by adding up all of the financial and non-financial assets and subtracting all the debts that are owed. Good job. Excellent. Everybody was a C on that one. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Which bank account is likely to pay the highest interest rate on money saved? A, a savings account, B, a 6-month CD or certificate of deposit, or C, a 3-year CD. Now count to 7 in my head and then we'll go forward. Okay. This one, C, a 3-year CD. CDs typically require a fixed holding period to avoid withdrawal penalties. Savings accounts don't provide an incentive for investors to constrain assets, as well as upward sloping yield curve. Like I act like I know what I'm talking about here. As well as, as well as the upward sloping yield curve. A higher interest rate is typically associated with a longer holding period. That last part of the sentence I totally got, but not the sloping yield curve. Goes over my head. All right, let's take a look here. Question, savings accounts and money market accounts are most appropriate for A, long-term investments like retirement, B, emergency funds and short-term goals, or C, earning a high rate of return. Okay. B, the answer is B, emergency funds and short-term goals. So money that we can get at quickly and, we don't have to keep it in there and there's not a penalty if we withdraw it too early. Most appropriate for holding those funds for emergencies or short-term goals. Well, let's see here. I think Andy, you guys are doing great. No wonder we all work in the industries we work in. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. To reduce the total finance costs paid over the life of an auto loan, you should choose a loan with A, the lowest monthly payment, B, the longest repayment term, or C, the shortest repayment term. All right, let's see what we got. C, the shortest repayment term. The amount of finance costs paid is dependent on the term and the interest rate. So the lower the interest rate and the shorter the terms are going to lower the total amount that you pay in finance costs. Once again, all of our smarties in the audience, that's awesome. All right. If you always pay the full balance on your credit card, which of the following is least important? A, the annual interest rate, B, annual fees, or C, the line of credit? Okay, let's see what we got here. Now, looks like what we got, A, annual interest rate. If you use your credit card for convenience only, i.e. you're paying off the bill in full, whenever the bill comes in or before it's due, then the annual rate of interest, the rate at which you would borrow the funds, is not relevant. You're not going to be paying interest, which is the whole idea, hopefully. In a perfect world, that's the whole idea. All right. Look at that. Okay. I think this is our last question here. Currently, everyone is eligible to get free weekly credit reports from the 3 national credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, by visiting annualcreditreport.com. True or false? All right. It's true. Right now, all the way through April of 2021, everybody can get a free credit report from each one of the 3 major bureaus every single week. And they are putting that's in place, like I said, through April of next year. So that's awesome. The whole idea was so that people would be reviewing their credit reports, hopefully on a more frequent basis, to make sure that things were reporting correctly during this time of COVID, because they knew a lot of people would be putting things on a temporary forbearance or deferment, or not having to make their payments. So making sure that everything stays correct. Okay. We have about 5 minutes left here until our break. I think we're going to hand it over to Ryan Davis. And I think that's it for me for right now. So I hope you guys are all enjoying this forum and learning a lot. I will talk to you soon. Thank you.
But first, I want to introduce myself and leave you with a few thoughts before you go. My name is Ryan Davis. I'm the Asset Building Coordinator and Certified Credit Counselor with Community Action of Skagit County. I also lead the Skagit Asset Building Coalition. Thank you to Ann Price for sharing her wisdom and insights into deep set structures that continue to make the work of equity and inclusion necessary. The challenge is large, and I'm heartened to be joined with everyone here to face it directly. I'm reminded of the quote, "No one can do everything, but everyone can do something." Thank you to all of the people who make this event possible. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the partners who generally gave in-kind and monetary support for the forum. You'll see their names scroll across your monitor over the next 2 morning sessions. As we break, consider what it might look like to put Ann's words into action in our organization. How might we show the receipts of a positive, equitable foundation? Post your response in the chat box or pose the question to colleagues when you return to work today. When we return, we'll hear from Darren Liddell, who will be discussing Fresh EBT, Tech Access for Social Impact. See you soon. Welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Darren Liddell, who will be discussing Fresh EBT, Tech Access for Social Impact. Like me, Darren is passionate about empowering community members to achieve their financial goals. Darren has been working in the financial empowerment field for over 10 years and currently serves on Propel's government and nonprofit partnership team. In this role, he focuses on partnering with organizations to positively impact families receiving SNAP benefits. Before joining Propel, Darren served at the Financial Clinic as Director of Program Innovation. He oversaw the financial coaching, tax preparation, data, and policy teams, and provided innovative direction to his local and national programs. Darren currently serves as a member of Prosperity Now's Taxpayer Opportunity Network Steering Committee and AFCPE's Government Affairs Task Force, and is an accredited financial counselor through AFCPE. Previously, he managed Miami-Dade County's VITA Tax Collaborative of 40 tax sites, coordinated the Miami portion of the first RCT study of financial coaching, and has years of experience as a financial coach and a VITA program manager. Outside of work, he is an Eagle Scout, and he enjoys learning new cultures through food. Darren is a proud tax nerd and a racial wealth equity advocate. He aims to learn more about opportunities to address the racial wealth divide through policy, financial coaching, fintech, and tax time. Please join me in welcoming him today. Darren.
All right, hello everybody. Really glad to be here today and excited to tell you a bit about Fresh EBT and the work that we've been doing on the ground since the pandemic has really hit. This has been a really, really difficult time for many of the families that we serve. So really just kind of going to tell you about what we've been learning. Thanks for the introduction, Ryan, as well. But yeah, I guess with that, let's dive into it. All right, so I've baked a few questions into the presentation, and most of them are kind of questions to get your mind going. But as you see these questions, feel free to put them in the chat or respond in the chat. Although depending on the timing of the presentation, I may be able to get to some of the questions at the end. But I don't see why you guys can't have a really thoughtful dialogue in the chat. I'll be trying my best to follow it, and I've got a little screen down here, so if you see me looking down, I'm probably looking at the chat. But anything I don't get to, I'll try to come back to at the very end if time allows. So with that, the first kind of question for you all is, as you think about these last few months and everything that's been the really unique year that is 2020, what challenges have your families been facing due to COVID-19 or otherwise? So just let that marinate for just a second. And as you guys think and type in the chat, I'll go on and I'll come back in a bit. All right, so what are we going to be covering in this presentation? I'm going to tell you guys a bit about Propel and FreshEBT. We're going to go through some of our COVID response, what we've been doing to positively impact our families or to attempt to positively impact our families, as well as we'll go through some household impact survey and what our users are kind of telling us. We'll go through some key findings from that survey, as well as talk about next steps. All right, so don't see anything coming in the chat yet, but y'all hopefully didn't take too long on the break. Jump in there if you have anything to add. So my kind of primer question is, consider this. Do you currently use an app to manage your finances? How often do you use it? You know, how useful is it to you? And, you know, and is it really built into the way that you manage your money? Keep that in the back of your mind as you think about what we're going to be talking about here next. So who is Propel? Who is FreshEBT? You guys know a bit about me already, but so Propel, at Propel, our mission really is to focus on building technology that it's modern, respectful, and effective for helping families and for helping low-income families to really improve their financial health. We're a Brooklyn-based organization, as much as you can be based anywhere when everything is remote in the pandemic. But we kind of the faces behind the organization really come from government, nonprofit, and advocacy, as well as from tech startups. There's a few reform Silicon Valley folks, you know, all with this mission around really trying to build financial health. We are a for-profit company, and we're backed by venture capital impact investors, and we really are trying to, again, do some good and build tech that helps folks on the ground. All right, and I see some comments coming in. Thanks folks for chiming in. So as we're kind of thinking about setting the stage for who we're helping and what SNAP households look like in the U.S., around 71% of low-income Americans have a smartphone, but very few financial products are developed around their needs. So we really saw that as an opportunity. And when our organization was in the very, very early stages, our kind of co-founders were in grocery stores, talking to families, asking about what their experiences were as they were trying to purchase food, what barriers they were facing. And what really kind of rose to the top is folks would come to the store. They would either have to remember to have their receipt from the last time that they visited, or they would need to call a 1-800 number to find out their SNAP balance or their EBT balance. So they kind of really aim to find out, is there a way for us to solve that problem and just make it a little bit easier for families? If you're walking in, you've got two kids running around, calling a 1-800 number can be a bit difficult, especially if we're just trying to run in and get something quickly. So we kind of rose out of the user experiences and feedback that we heard from folks on the ground. Yeah, I'll keep going from there. We know that technology alone won't solve all of poverty's problems, but we do think that it can play a really key role in kind of elevating success, and especially in terms of those who are using safety net programs and helping them to build financial security. All right. So around 36 million Americans are receiving SNAP each year. That, of course, is now higher than ever because of the pandemic. But you know, again, it was really, really difficult for folks to kind of do something as basic as check their EBT balance. User feedback kind of told us that it wasn't unified, that things were kind of difficult. So our current focus is really on making SNAP supportive and integrated into a user experience. But in addition to that, we also just realized that we saw that there was a gap. There's an opportunity to really use tech to hopefully help folks. And you guys can see on the screen here, there's a picture of the app, as well as a kind of dummy client, Maria Green. You can see both her SNAP balance and her cash benefits balance, or TANF balance there. All right, so when you look deep into the app, here are kind of the things that we cover. So folks, typically the most popular feature in the app is two things. I'll talk a little bit later, and that's our response to COVID. That's become one of the most popular features, and the other is the balance checking. So folks can use the manage, earn, or save tab. So in the manage tab, it focuses on budgeting tools, so folks can check their balance for SNAP or TANF. They can see their transaction history. They can set a weekly budget with the goal of stretching those funds out a little bit longer. In addition to that, we have ways for folks to save. So that includes digital coupons, healthy receipts, and partner content. About 50% of our content is nonprofit partner content, as well as about 50% is ads, that is paid ads from companies. And we screen those ads ourselves. A human looks at them. We're not like an open ad platform. We're not using Google Ads or anything else like that. We really want to make sure that any information that we really want to make sure that any information that we're putting out in our app is healthy for families and isn't predatory. So we do hand select all the ads that are listed in our app. And then in addition to that, we also include a jobs board for folks that are looking to find and connect with jobs, as well as find local employers as well. All right, so how do each of those areas kind of quickly make impacts for the folks that we're serving? So the budgeting tools we found through a study that was conducted by Harvard, that folks that are using the app are able to stretch their food funds, their EBT funds, an extra day or two, which doesn't seem like a lot, but over the course of a year, it really can make a big difference in families' lives, especially when times are hard and money is hard to stretch. In addition to that, there's been around $20 million in grocery savings, and around 120 folks have applied for jobs as well. I actually had a relatively recent user experience where user interview where a client told me that she found a job through the app, and that she really saw it as a really valuable resource. So now you may be thinking, all right, that's great. Who are you guys serving? What do the demographics look like? Who's kind of the folks behind the app? So we have about 4 million users that are monthly active on our app. We're in all 50 states. Folks that are using the app typically are using it between 10 and 15 times in a month. It actually has gone up since the pandemic has started, where folks are accessing the app more often, which makes sense. Most of our users, a large majority, are female and single parents. In addition, the average age is 36, and we skew a bit young, kind of facilitating an app that is based around technology. In addition to that, around 60% live in urban areas, and then 4% use the app in Spanish. All right, so what about SNAP in Washington? As we look at kind of the state of SNAP benefits in Washington, this data comes from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, and it's not current for the pandemic, but it's kind of the best data that we could find to speak on the topic. So who does SNAP reach in Washington? Around 825,000 residents in Washington are SNAP recipients, there's around this many folks in Washington. Around 11% of those are SNAP recipients. And then, so basically that means that 1 in 9 Washingtonians is getting SNAP, as well as 56% of families with children are receiving SNAP in the state. For us, that looks like 100K active users in Washington. And again, that has grown since the pandemic has started as well. So I've got a question for you guys, something for you to think about as I look at the chat and see kind of what's been happening here for a second. But any surprises so far as you've looked in the presentation and listened in about either Fresh EBT, SNAP recipients in Washington, or beyond? And then I have my tablet here. You guys forgive me for kind of bringing it up, reading some of the comments. All right, so some great things about SNAP not covering enough of folks' needs, and we see this constantly. Our families are constantly telling us that the SNAP doesn't last them throughout the entire month, as well as Ray Robinson mentioned that folks who are receiving SNAP typically have their SNAP reduced if they're applying for unemployment, which is a great point, something we've seen as well, and tried to kind of message to our users is if SNAP, if you're receiving unemployment and your unemployment ends, then be sure to reapply for SNAP ASAP so that you can kind of maximize those benefits. All right, and then I think folks sometimes have so Teresa mentioned that folks sometimes have difficulty getting a new EBT card if they don't have a safe address where it can be mailed. So yeah, sometimes it can be difficult. There are options to pick those up at offices during the pandemic, but that also may be very hard for many families. And thanks, Emily, for also mentioning the job search feature. So keeping going on, you guys continue to drop things in the chat, and I'll do my best to address them. So as we go on, we know that COVID-19 has been one of the most, one of the most devastating things for low-income Americans in a very long time. And we've seen its impact firsthand on our users. We're working hard to make sure that users know kind of about what options are available to them. So how do we kind of find out from our users what's happening? Well, since the pandemic has started, we've launched a COVID resource center. And basically what we do in that resource center is we have, this has become the most popular app, featuring the app behind balance checking. What we've seen is we've included information around rental assistance and eviction protection. We've included information around PEBT. And for those who don't know, PEBT is a benefit that is available to families that are on free and reduced lunches. But during the pandemic, since many schools are virtual or partially virtual, those that are can receive the free and reduced lunch money on an EBT card. So we're constantly kind of messaging the policy changes to our users and really letting them know how, when that policy happens in their state, when it goes active, when they can expect the funds. And I'll dive into a little bit more of how users are receiving and knowing that they're receiving those funds, but there's typically some confusion. So we do our best to kind of clear that up in our app. In addition to that, we've got information about economic impact payments and finding a free Vita site, as well as doing your taxes virtually to get your refund, as well as using the IRS's non-filer tool. We've really tried to focus on the things that users tell us they are the most interested in. So unemployment information is there. Emergency allotments for EBT are there. So that's basically every household, many households across the country are receiving the largest amount of EBT possible for their household size due to the emergency. So all of that to say, we're really trying to be intentional about messaging what's useful to users and getting the feedback from them that helps us inform what we should be featuring in the app. All right, so what do users kind of tell us? They tell us that Fresh EBT is a trusted source that's timely and responsive in times of crisis. Over the 5 years the app has been around, we have done our best to respond to emergencies. So an example of this is many households have been responding to the recent kind of hurricanes and tropical storms, as well as fires kind of happening around the country. And in those places where they're happening, folks can get emergency benefits and emergency SNAP that kind of they become eligible for if their food expires in their fridge and that kind of thing from an emergency, or they're no longer able to access it. So we've really done our best to really message in the app those things quickly. And the COVID kind of response center was a resource center was an example of that. Really trying to pivot quickly and have that information available for families in the same way that many of you guys did on the ground in terms of working with families and trying to message through social media and through your direct service providers, that information as well. All right, so I talked a bit about our COVID response in the help center there. So this is really just a visual for you guys to see it. So you can see right underneath the balance checking is where we feature this section of the app. So folks get a chance to really see it on the very first page. And then are clicking in it and they can select the things they're most interested in. I didn't talk about healthcare resources, but we also have resources because that is, of course, a really essential need for folks in this time. As well as having things like 211. I mentioned that about 50% of our ads are with nonprofits, and we really try to elevate the resources that exist out there already. But we also are looking to learn more about what's happening locally, and that's really a lot of the work that the government team is doing now, It's trying to elevate what's happening on the ground to our users in the app. And if you guys ever have resources that you think we should be sharing, I've got my contact information at the end of the presentation. Please get in touch with me. We'd love to see about featuring it. And I should mention that for most nonprofits, a large majority of them, the ads are free in the app. It's only if folks want a larger amount of data analysis, that kind of thing, that they, can that they would look into some kind of paid engagement. But most folks, it's free if you're a nonprofit. So y'all keep that in mind. All right, great. So what's one other way that we've been responding to families in the pandemic? So we saw really quickly that families needed cash. They needed emergency cash to help meet their needs, and weren't sure the best way to go about getting it. This was in the time when, especially in the early parts of the pandemic, when applying for unemployment was the online systems were sluggish and things were taking longer than families had. We partnered with an organization called Give Directly and Stand for Your Children to distribute $1,000 cash grants to families that were using FreshEBT. And in Washington, so our kind of goal was to distribute $100 million to families across the country. So far, we've done $115 million in contributions to families, and most of that was donated by folks who donated to Give Directly. And then we served as the conduit to really connect it with the families in need. In Washington, we distributed $764,000 in Give Directly funds. And users, talked about how those funds are really, really key to their, were really, really helpful to them in a time when things were very hard and they were really, really trying to stretch. And we got a quote here from Shanita in North Carolina, who just really mentioned that she's a single mom of 6. She lost her job due to the virus, and she was, basically had a lot of bills and responsibilities, a lot of things to kind of balance. Her plan for catching up on bills and rent. She was planning to try to catch up on her bills and rent, but she really saw this $1,000 payment as a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it really, it really did help their family. So yes. So there is FreshEBT is a really good connection point. We really work to listen and learn from families. And I think that I mentioned that we're very much a user first organization. The clients tell us what we should be featuring. They tell us if a feature isn't working. They tell us if they like it, if they don't like it. We really do our best to try to keep our ears to the ground in terms of how we can provide useful information to them. So as I kind of prompt you guys with the next question for you to think about, as I take a look at the chat as well, I wanted to mention that the Financial Empowerment Network is also available as a resource that is featured in FreshEBT. And you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with everyoneiswelcome.org. It's a valuable resource for information, and we also feature it in our app as well. So as y'all think about this question, I'm going to pull up the chat here to see if anybody else put in anything. Looks like there's a question about submitting ads. I'll prompt you guys with that at the end. The easiest way is to email me, and then I'll send you the form you fill out to kind of upload the information. All right. So as you guys think about the challenges that your clients have been facing since March, I'm really interested to see what's coming top of mind for you. Are they the same things that I've talked about already? Are there other topics or challenges? We also are really working hard to connect with practitioners to learn what they see happening on the ground. So, feel free to drop those in the chat. So as I go on to the next thing, I see finding employment here. Y'all feel free to please keep providing things. But so I mentioned that we have COVID impact surveys, and that's really one of the big ways that we find out what's happening on the ground from our users. I'm going to talk a bit about those surveys now, how we collected them, and how they inform our work. We set up a website recently for folks that are interested in that survey data, so I'll share that at the end as well. But for now, y'all, let's go on a journey and talk a bit about what we've been learning from users. So how do we kind of feature surveys in the app? So for folks that that are using the app, they basically log in, they don't get a notification or anything. We actually almost never send notifications to our users unless there's an emergency where they have to take an action. So one example of that is in a few states, users have had to, or clients have had to apply for a benefit like PEBT. It wasn't just automatically given to them, and it's happened in like 2 or 3 states. In those states, we did send a notification to our users that kind of was meant to nudge them around applying. But so typically folks are coming into the app. Once they open it, they'll see here, we need your help. We've got a quick survey for you to answer. Once they click the survey, they can take it on their phone. It's all mobile friendly. And we really try to make sure that everything in our app is mobile friendly. For anyone who hasn't tried to use a non-mobile friendly site on a smartphone, it's terrible and can be really, really frustrating. So we really make sure that's paramount for us. And that also trickles down to our survey process. All right, so what do we focus on in the surveys that we've been conducting? The main topics here are financial security, health, access to benefits, and then also collecting user stories and user experiences. And then I won't go into the kind of topic areas here, but you guys will see how each of them kind of come up here in just a second. All right, so kind of how many folks have we surveyed? What's the methodology for our surveys? This is for the folks that are really into data and are data nerds, and kind of the way that I am. So you guys can basically see some quick information here. We've been running surveys since March, and we typically are surveying a small sample size and then extrapolating that information. Surveys are typically offered for about 48 hours, as well as the folks that are filling out the survey typically match our population. We have a better kind of gender diversity in the folks that are taking the surveys, as well as many kind of single folks are filling it out, as well as folks that are head of household. All right, so the first kind of, and I've broken this up into two parts. We've got the key findings from the most recent survey, which I'll spend the most time on. And then this slide is actually focused on what we've been seeing kind of across all of the surveys. And I put on here September 29th, but it really is kind of like the surveys that happened pre-September. These are some of the key findings from there. And then we'll go into much deeper into the survey that we gathered from our users in September. So the key findings really are that folks are concerned with housing. Housing is the biggest expense for most of our clients, which we know. It's a big challenge for them. Paying for housing is a big challenge. So that is, of course, top of mind for many of our clients. In addition to that, workers with reduced hours started working more, but they still are feeling the impacts of either the pandemic and that they're maybe not working as many hours, as well as some folks still remain completely unemployed. PEBT helps to reduce food insecurity for about half of the families that we're working with, but not everyone is able to get PEBT. For example, many immigrant families may struggle to access that benefit. And then, of course, kind of following along with what was mentioned in the previous presentation by Anne, we see racial wealth inequity kind of popping up amongst our users as well. And we'll talk about that much more deeply too. All right, so question, thought, break for me to read some of you all's questions. So we're aiming to understand user needs and where user needs first organization, but I'm sure you all are doing that as well. There's a good question here around, do we do surveys in Spanish? Typically, we're only surveying in English. We haven't done Spanish surveys since the pandemic, but it's something we've thought about but haven't actually implemented yet. Good question, Lynn. And yeah, that's a great point from Emily around many sites being closed still, and having folks access benefits if they need to go in person can really be a challenge. All right, I think that's all for now. So let's go on to dive deeper into these findings. All right, so as I mentioned, this section is going to focus on kind of those some of the findings I mentioned before, as well as some new ones. So folks still continue to see that there's no slack, and in order to weather emergencies, folks feel like they have a need. I'll talk more about that, as well as customers think that it would be helpful to have cash to cover everyday expenses like rent. Households are supporting and being helped by friends and family. And I'll show you guys some really interesting data on that. And lastly, federal interventions are making a difference, but many of our clients see them as running out and ending soon. And that brings them a lot of worry. All right, so the first insight. And as you guys are looking through these, please drop in questions. Even if I can't get to them now, I'll try to get to them later. But so the first insight is there's no slack around households that are being forced into to really do what they have to do to make ends meet. So that looks like folks are reporting eating less. They're eating less than they've ever been eating in order to kind of really stretch those funds and that food more than they ever have before. As well as, I'll kind of bounce around here. 32% of our users have reported visiting a food pantry, and this was recent. This was in the survey that we conducted in the first half of September. Most folks have, or many folks have skipped a bill as well. Just under half of our users report skipping a bill. A lot of folks have gone without prescriptions when they typically would have in trying to kind of balance their expenses, which is really tough. As well as 76% of folks mentioned they had less than $99 in savings. So, you know, households are really going to extreme measures to get through the end of the month. As well as folks are borrowing funds. 57% of folks mentioned that they've been using their credit to pay everyday expenses. If they even have access to credit, we know that that's a challenge for many of our families as well. Folks are reporting that getting food, household products, and products of the like are difficult. And then kind of lastly, 56% of respondents said that they had $25 at the time of the survey, and then less than 76% had $99. So again, painting the picture of there's a real scarcity and it's a really bad, challenging time for many of the families that we're helping. All right, so I've broken this up into like partial data, and for folks that aren't into data, it's totally cool. I've got some stories for you. So I'm only going to read one of these, but we've been collecting with we've been kind of asking our clients what they, we always ask for user quotes and that kind of thing. So here's one that I enjoyed. Jamie in Michigan said, I've had to borrow money from relatives to make ends meet. I also had to pawn items to pay bills, such as my car and gas from my card, so that I can continue to work. And this kind of really paints the picture of how families are making really difficult choices in these pandemic times to make sure that they can feed their family and put food on the table. I won't go into the other two slides, but I noticed, so like when I was prepping the presentation, I really looked hard for a quote for our user in Washington, but I couldn't find one. So you guys, please forgive me on that front. I did try, but there just weren't any kind of really readily available for the presentation. All right, so the second insight that we're hearing from users is if they could get help with anything, it would be rent. So you guys can see the pie chart here. I won't go through all of them, but the biggest things that users wanted help with is rent, paying utilities, and food assistance. The really big takeaways here are around 75% of users report that the pandemic has caused them to fall behind on rent, mortgages, or utilities. As well as 80% have user stimulus bills to cover rent or bills. So y'all keep in mind that this, has folks are doing whatever they can, but there still is a feeling that they don't have enough. In the absence, we've learned so in seeing that folks are really having a hard time paying rent and would like help with rent, we've really tried to highlight some of the resources that are available around eviction moratoriums, and really just trying to highlight partners that are doing the work both locally and nationally, helping folks to write letters and automating that letter writing process so that if they need to send something to a landlord to prevent the eviction, they know what steps to take. We're really trying to make sure that users know how they can be proactive with that and have the tools ready at their disposal when the time is needed. All right, so I actually didn't mention this before. I'll add one more thing before I go on to the next slide, which is that users have, one of the features that we have in the app is a map, and the map features food pantries, food banks, there are Vita sites on it, as well as any convenience stores or grocery stores that accept EBT. For some folks, visually seeing it is in kind of knowing that 500 feet away, 2 miles away is a store where they can use their benefit that maybe they didn't know about. It's something that can also be helpful. So just kind of wanted to highlight that we are trying to highlight folks that are doing really great work, and where folks can spend their funds as well. So great. I didn't mention on-power partners in that, but they're also included in the map that we feature for our users. So The next is around the $600 that folks were receiving earlier in the pandemic around unemployment, but are no longer receiving. And this has been, as this user kind of highlights, it's been extremely tough. The $600 was what was getting me by. It was helping me to pay bills, to give my 2 children the things that they need without worrying about going without other things that were helping them to make ends meet. Since it's ended, I've barely been able to get by. We've been struggling immensely, and the little bit of money that I've saved for emergencies is gone. My daughter's 7th birthday is today, and I wasn't even able to get her anything. Again, highlighting that families are really making hard choices and doing whatever they can to put food on the table. All right. So our third insight is how have households been, how have households been giving and receiving support? How have they been supporting each other? How have they been reporting to us that they've been getting help? And the biggest way really is communities coming together, friends and families helping each other. And then in addition to that, the nonprofit workers on the ground, you all are doing, and for those who are working at nonprofits in the audience, you're making a big impact too. Around 1 in 5 of our users reported that they have received help from a nonprofit, which is great, as well as religious organizations as well. So it's nice that all these things are being offered, that so much is, everyone's really coming together to help everyone in this time in a really unique way. But even still, we all know that we're not able to meet as much of a need in the community as we would like to. So folks are kind of turning to families and friends to help them through this kind of difficult time. All right. So, I want to kind of highlight another key takeaway here is that federal interventions are making a difference, but more is needed, which has kind of been the understanding of the last few slides. Around just under 30%, or just under 29% of our families report that they have skipped meals, even though they're receiving food benefits, and their kids are on free or reduced lunch, which is really, really difficult, as well as just under 25% of folks report having a hard time if they didn't receive PEBT or if they did receive PEBT. Basically, the food benefits are not enough, and folks need more, and policy can really be a way to help us change the narrative around that. In addition to that, folks who get SNAP reported that fewer eligible families who got SNAP reported relying on others for meals. So for those that are getting SNAP, it is making a difference in their lives and helping them to make it through this hard time as well. All right, almost done with these data points, and then I'll go back to the comments and see what's happening there. So the fourth insight that I wanted to highlight is federal interventions are making a difference, but they're running out. As it stands now, a lot of these benefits are set to expire in December. Unemployment, in addition to many of the food benefits and the expanded food benefits. So for those that are involved in advocacy, now is a really key time to think about what you can do and how you can message to the folks that are making those decisions, how your families are experiencing this. I'm talking a lot about our families, but you all also have really powerful stories from your clients that you can use to advocate as well. All right, so for us, and this is a lot of kind of what I've highlighted before around PEBT, I did want to bring up one quick point around economic impact payments and how clients are really using them. I mentioned that 70% of them mentioned they're using it on bills and rent. From there, the other things that they mentioned were food, household items, and then as well as using it to pay off debt. Those were the 3 biggest categories that were not bills and rent. All right. I apologize, guys. I have that slide in there twice, as well as here's the information about the economic impact payments. And the last little bit that I'm going to talk about here is, before I go back and check the comments, is insight number 5 focuses on racial disparities. So just like Anne mentioned in her presentation, we see the impacts on our users. Basically, more Black households reported borrowing money and using credit for expenses than any other households. More Black households report not having or running low on essential household needs, as well as more Black and Latinx households are looking for work more than white households. So all households across the country are struggling in many, many ways, but we do see this disproportionately affecting communities of color in many ways than it does white communities. I think this is not a surprise to most of us. And I think like a lot of the things that Anne mentioned as well, in terms of solutions and what you can do are really, really key here. Yeah, I have a bit more data I wanted to go into as well, especially around gender inequity. So for us, we saw that women were much more likely to report eviction in the past 30 days than men, as well as 70% of the women that reported experiencing eviction in the past 30 days. So basically 17% of women experienced eviction versus 12% of men. In addition to that, 80% of fresh EBT users, around 85% are women. And they've indicated that a majority of these evictions would have involved their children as well, which is a really hard stat to hear, but is very real for what's happening out in the world. As well as for Black and Latinx households, they reported a change in housing. So 44% of Black and Latinx households mentioned that their housing has changed during the pandemic, compared to 33% of white households. All right, and I have one more slide on that really just presents this in a slightly different visual way. I've mentioned the kind of points at the top already. In terms of disparities of access, focusing on economic impact payments, 71% of white households got their economic impact payments versus under 70% for both Black and Latinx households. Black households haven't received PEBT in greater amounts than white households, and you'll see those amounts here. So I think the question that I think about is, what can we really do to make sure our families and the folks that we're helping are really connecting and maximizing these benefits? And how can we make a difference there? As well as there are bigger systemic challenges as well, and how can we address those also? All right, so we then asked users, what would they tell their mayor or governor if they could talk to them about how the pandemic has affected them? And I'll highlight quickly here, Brooks mentioned that helping with utilities and food, being home more has made these costs go up. April mentioned that a secular stimulus check would help her to get back on her feet. Rebecca mentioned that we need more food stamps to feed our kids, and I worry that we're going to run out of food, and the pantries only help once a month. They hardly have anything to give. And some pantries were offering unlimited food early in the pandemic, but many have shifted back to their systems of giving out, you can only collect once a week or maybe once a day, but before you could kind of get in line as often as you needed to kind of have your needs met, depending on the pantry. So we see this happening very, very real for our customers. And then folks say, is there a way to cut rent and utility until December? Having a lot of trouble getting on our feet. So yeah, again, we see folks are really feeling the impacts of the pandemic. So that was a lot. It was a lot of kind of difficult topics and difficult conversations. I'm sure you guys know it better than a lot of the practitioners in the country and a lot of the workers in the country. But I'd love to hear a bit about how you see this happening on the ground for you. Do you think that you can use any of this data for social good? As well as, is there anything that really surprised you from what I've gone over so far? And I'm going to take a second and go back to the comments. All right. All right, so I see a few comments in here. I'm not sure I completely understand the question from Lorraine. She mentioned, how are you defining client experience? And I think it depends on the client and what the specific experience is. Lorraine, feel free to drop in a bit more there. Lisa said, what communities have been successful in raising awareness around the app, and have they launched their outreach efforts? So we've had, recently, we're working with the Food Bank of Florida to help to elevate a social media campaign around the app and helping get to get information out around that. In Florida, that's the state that I've worked closely with. I know another one of my colleagues, Jen, has been working with 3 other states to also kind of highlight via social media and with flyers to their clients. We have all the things kind of available in a toolkit if you guys want to share it out. Yeah, I think FreshEBT is a really powerful resource to help users to access their SNAP benefits. And something I'd be interested in challenging you all around is, I'm sure you see needs on the ground that are happening with your clients that possibly could be met by or enhanced by technology. Are there things that you guys think that you could get a grant to pilot, that you could explore or survey users around, that could be baked into a feature or app? I think I've highlighted everything that we've been doing so far. Not to say that you guys should be championing FreshEBT. I think that it's great if you do, but I also would love to challenge you a bit to think about how can you use technology to help your clients in a way that really impacts them. We do help a lot of families, but at the same time, we're not reaching everyone we would like to help. And it's kind of this, there's more folks than we can help as well, and technology doesn't help everybody. But for those that do, how can the folks in the room and attending this conference really push themselves to integrate technology into the work that they're doing, and have it really, really nice and easy user experience for your clients as well. All right, so I see a few more comments. I see Rebecca saying that she just checked out the app and there's a good bit of resources that aren't limited to just food resources. And if you all see something that is glaringly missing that we should be featuring in the app, if you download it, then please let us know. Again, I'll share how to add that in just a little bit. Emily mentioned that she didn't know about FreshEBT until recently. Glad to hear, glad it's been valuable to you, Emily. And I see some other folks kind of echoing those comments. Cool. Well, glad this has been valuable to you all. So I've got a few more user quotes that I want to go through, and then I want to open it up for questions. So if you have a question that's at the top of your mind, either about the app, about how we're surveying users, around the nonprofits that we partnered with in the past, feel free to drop those in. I think that I've got about 20-ish minutes or so left. So I would love for you guys to kind of drop in questions that you thought of throughout the presentation, and really just kind of work to answer those. And if we don't have any, we'll end a bit early, but hopefully I'll hear from you guys in just a second. All right, great. So here's one user, Tiara, and we kind of asked her what changed for you in the last few weeks, and she said, "I cook more food now. By cooking more food, I'm going to run out of food. I've got to wait until my food stamps come. Who's going to say my food stamps are going to come? Typically, I only have to cook dinner because breakfast and lunches are provided at school. But for my kids, getting the food at school typically doesn't work for them. They've been offering PB&J, but our kids are allergic to peanut butter. And we've seen this kind of happen over and over again. And this is a quote from earlier in the pandemic, when some schools are still open partially, but Tiara kind of highlights the fact that even if food resources are being provided, they may not meet the family's needs. And by empowering families through SNAP benefits, they really can make the choices that are best for them and that apply to their situation. So yeah, we know that SNAP isn't something that is used for folks for forever, but it does kind of help in these emergency times, really help folks tailor to their household specific needs. All right, so a few more challenges here, and I see a few questions coming in as well. Y'all keep them coming. Is we ask clients what challenges do they face as parents, and they really kind of mentioned this. Shauna mentioned that it's always a rainy day. You never know what to expect. When you have kids, you have to shift quickly and work to make sure that their needs are taken care of. As well as Amber mentioned that I don't feel like my kids should go without too many things. I have to juggle different bills and make sure Wi-Fi is covered. Thank God they are potty trained, so I don't have to worry about buying Pampers, which is true. I think I am not a parent, but I have incredible amount of respect to anyone who is parenting, especially during the pandemic when a lot of learning is remote and working a full-time job, taking care of kids, making lunch, feeding, For many of our families, they feel all of those same struggles. In addition, they may have trouble having reliable internet, having internet that's fast enough. So all of that to say, shout out to all the parents in the room. You all are rock stars and continue to, you know, make magic happen in a time that is largely unmagical for much of the country. All right, so I'm going to go to these questions in a little bit, but I wanted to highlight how you guys can find out more information about Propel. And if you're interested in more survey information, this is the link that you would go to. So joinpropel.com/COVID-pulse-survey. This is a page it's only been up about 2 days. Before we were emailing out the reports to our kind of folks that are on our newsletter. And we're still continuing to do that, but we also decided to now try to feature that on our website. So you guys can find all the information about our most recent survey there, and we'll continue to update that with additional survey information as the surveys come out. We just finished our October survey, and we'll hopefully have that data out around the end of the month or so we can report what families are telling us. My contact information is on here, as well as the website for FreshEBT and Propel. Y'all, please check out the app, download it and check it out. If you would like to get a dummy account so that you can play around and see what it's like for a user to see the full features of the app, since many of you, I suspect, are not on receiving EBT benefits, let me know. I can share that with you. Again, my email is here. Before I turn to the questions too, I do want to highlight again that we feature nonprofit partners, mostly for free in the app. An example of that, again, was everyoneiswelcome.org. You know, really great resource for Washington and finding out what's happening there. So we have worked with the folks kind of behind the scenes to make it happen. But if you guys have things like that you would like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Yeah, and we'll see about getting things up in the app. Cool. So I see a few questions came in. So Aaron asked, is there a timeline for additional language offerings? Sorry if I missed. So not right now, Aaron. I think we're trying to, so we offer the app in Spanish, and we've been working hard to like really make that as strong as possible before we move on to other languages. But we've heard from a number of clients around a bunch of languages that they would like also the app to feature in so they could share it with their family more broadly. So no update yet, but hopefully soon we'll be able to have more languages available. All right, and then there's a question here that how long has the app been available in Washington? So we've been around, the organization's just right around 6 years old, and the app has been out in the wild for around 5 years. When it launched, it was available in all 50 states. So it's been in Washington since about 5 years ago as well. And then are we doing work with financial institutions? Can you summarize any of those collaborations? So good question. So this is a good question that I don't know the full answer to. But if the person who asked this question if they shoot me an email, I'm happy to get back to them with a fuller answer. I'm relatively new to the Propel team, so during my time, we haven't had any financial institution collaborations, but we possibly could be interested. Obviously, we believe in Bank On and the Bank On standards, and like financial products availability to meet clients where they are and to really meet their needs and help elevate them financially. We've done some work internally in terms of thinking about is there something that we could offer that would help folks, but haven't finalized anything yet, and they're still kind of like asking users, but and kind of doing research. But I think we would be open to that if someone had an interesting proposal. Please don't be a stranger to reach out if you've got a question. All right, is there any way to access the toolkit that you mentioned? Oh, is this the Everyone is Welcome resource? Because if not, check that out. But then everything that we have is either available in the app live or we post it on our blog. So if you go to freshebt.com/blog, you'll see we've got blog posts there that speaks to a lot of things that are in our coronavirus information center. but much more in depth. So in the app, it's typically like, short, really consumable descriptions of policy, how they impact the client, and then what action they need to take, if any, in the blog. And then we typically link to the blog from there and tell folks more information around, for example, it might be, and for unemployment information, they might, in the app will have, click here to apply for unemployment. If you're not sure if you qualify, here's a screener. It takes 2 minutes. From there, learn more at our blog. And then once they kind of go to the blog, they can see about lost wages assistance. They can see about pandemic unemployment. There's much more details about what each of those things mean, and how they can access them specifically for their state as well. And if I didn't mention that already, we have 50 COVID information centers, one for each state, that's updated specifically based on that state's available resources as well. So all of that to say, if you haven't been able to log into the app and check out the COVID Resource Center, or if you can't see it fully, then shoot me an email, I'll shoot you a demo account, and you'll be able to see it like a user sees it. All right, so there's a question here from Rhonda that she mentioned that our library is closed right now. There are brochures we can make available. Are there brochures we can make available for when they reopen? So if you guys hear messaging from local resources about a resource becoming available, we have messaged in the past, like, this resource will be coming then, like, stay tuned kind of thing. We'll post more information once we know. But we really want to make sure that the information we're offering to users, to our clients, is like timely relevant to them in that moment. So all of that to say, if you guys were to get information about libraries opening up, or maybe a new resource opening up in your community and you want it to be shared with us, and then kind of to the users through that, we'd want it to be something that's like pretty timely that they could act on very quickly. Just because, as you guys know, when you use your phones, you go into the app, you'll go into a financial app, you click around a few times, something pulls you away. We want to make sure that we're engaging folks, not asking them to wait too much or too often. So all that to say, like, yes, if there's information around that, please share it. And we'll see about getting it up, but we do want to make sure that it's responsive, and that folks are able to quickly find out the information that they would need. All right, and then, so that's a good question around FreshEBT partnering with DHS or DSHS for advertising and promotion. So in a few states, we have done promotions with their Department of Children and Families and kind of those equivalent departments. Washington isn't one yet, but we are, we are very, very interested in that. But it hasn't happened yet. If you guys know contacts who it would be helpful for us to connect to make that happen, very, very open to hearing them. I think we want to be a resource as much as we can to states and the folks that are facilitating EBT happening behind the scenes. We really want to be useful and share valuable data with them as well. And to be responsive in those times where we can get really quick information from our clients, but it may be more difficult for them to get information either out to the clients that are receiving EBT or other benefits, and really kind of like synergize there. So yeah, I think that's a great question, and we see it as a great opportunity, but it hasn't happened in many states just yet. All right, and then next question, from Alice. She's dropping in information around how you guys can find the recording, which is great. And then Alice is also going to highlight the information that Rhonda highlighted. Cool. So with that, y'all, I'm a little bit ahead of schedule. If there's any other questions, please drop them in as comments. I will give you guys a few examples of nonprofit partners who we worked with really recently to see what they're doing to meet needs in terms of the pandemic. So one example of that is the Kentucky Equal Justice Center developed a tool around helping families to fill out the eviction moratorium. So for folks that aren't familiar, the kind of the policies that are in place is in order to prevent, so they're basically, it's around the country, most folks cannot be evicted, but they typically have to take an action and submit a letter to a landlord if they're facing eviction. This tool that the Equal Justice Center came up with helps clients to fill out that tool in a really quick and succinct way. It's available in our app in the COVID Resource Center under rental information for folks that are interested. But it takes about 5 minutes. Folks can get that letter filled out. They can email it to their landlord, sign it electronically, or print it for themselves or save it for later in case they need it. We actually featured that in our app relatively recently, I think about a little over a week and a half ago, and we've seen around 1,600 users so far access the app as of late, or access that resource as of late last week, which is not a lot, but for those that are, we're hoping it's helping them to stay in their homes a bit longer, and being really beneficial, and being a really beneficial resource to them. In addition to KY Equal Justice Center, we've done work with the folks at Save Our Life down in San Francisco, although they definitely do work nationally in terms of messaging around savings, and encouraging. Save Our Life is a program where folks are encouraged to save. When they do save, they receive a benefit, and they receive a benefit that is similar to a match saving. They may get $5 for saving. They may get entered into a raffle, but it's really beneficial for folks that are interested in saving, but maybe haven't been successful at it in the past. They're really focused on positive behavior change and trying to make sure that there are really good incentives for folks to begin building that savings habit and behavior. And I see one new question from Rhonda as well. Who can I reach out to via email? Oh, wait, hold on. Who can I reach out to via email once I find out? We could totally do that in the state of Washington. Okay. Rhonda, if you find out, reach out to me. My email is on here. Keep in contact. Let's please chat. The other thing that we're doing too is we're a small, relatively new app, and I'll end after this and kind of I'll pass it back to the team. Kind of behind the scenes, but I think we're trying to get to better know states. We do have a small team. There's 3 folks on the government nonprofit team, and the organization is just around 40 folks. Many of those folks are engineers. There are folks that are, of course, doing administrative work, but our small team that's trying to get to know what's happening in terms of anti-poverty work, food benefits. We're small, but we want to connect deeply with states and really have meaningful engagement so that we feature the resources that we should be highlighting. So if you guys think that there's something that we should know, please tap me, reach out to me. My email is here. I've said it probably too many times now, but don't hesitate to reach out, and hopefully we can do some things that'll help Washingtonians reach their financial goals even more. So with that, I'm going to wrap, and I'll pass it back to the folks behind the scene to move on to the next step, or the next presenter.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for day 1 of the Bank on Washington Forum. My name is Jared Shapiro with Workforce Snohomish, where I work as an education and community navigator on various grant programs. I also lead the Snohomish County Asset Building Coalition. As we close day 1, I want to share a short video our planning team created, You're Good with Money. I hope you'll give a thought to who was your money role model. My role model was my mother. She was always really good with money. A single mom of 3 boys, it always amazed me how much she was able to provide for us on such a limited income. As I learned later in life, she did this through very conscientious budgeting and by planning for the future. She introduced us to concepts of money management at a very young age, including helping me set up a bank account and depositing checks that I would get as birthday gifts and for other occasions. She even taught me how to balance a checkbook. Many of the money habits that I have today come from her. She was good with money, and now I'm good with money.
Hey, you're good with money.
No, you're good with money.
You're good with money.
No, you're good with money.
You're good with money.
No, you're good with money.
You're good with money.
No, you're good with money.
You're good with money.
No, you're good with money.
No, you're good with money. We're
all
good
with money.
Who was your money role model? Thanks, everyone. We look forward to you joining us tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. for day 2 of the Bank on Washington Forum.